Welcome to the Sleepy Scientist. It's very good to have you here. Before tonight's little journey begins, it would be lovely to know where in the world you're watching from. Maybe you're tucked under a blanket while the room slowly goes quiet. Maybe you're on a late train, watching dark windows turn into mirrors. Maybe you're on the sofa with a cup of tea, a sleepy pet nearby, or a plant on the windowsill quietly pretending it is not the main character tonight. Wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable, settled, and ready to drift gently into the green, patient, surprisingly busy world of plants. If you enjoy these calm science journeys and would like more of them, a like and a subscribe help the Sleepy Scientist grow in exactly the right direction. Not too quickly, of course, nothing dramatic, more like a sensible fern. And if you're already subscribed, thank you. Your support really does help keep this quiet little corner of science alive and gently photosynthesizing. One small note before we begin. There is a book on the way. It is called Quantum Physics, explained clearly. The same unhurried sort of teaching you find here, now in a form you can hold and return to whenever you like. It is not quite finished, though it won't be long now. More on that another evening. Now, tonight's subject may seem peaceful at first. Plants do not chase, shout, argue, or wander into the kitchen at midnight looking for cheese. But beneath that stillness is a hidden world of chemistry, communication, movement, memory-like responses, alliances, defenses, and astonishing survival. A leaf is not just a leaf. A root is not just a root. A flower is not just a pretty botanical announcement saying, "Bees, this way, please." Every plant is a living system, quietly sensing light, gravity, touch, water, danger, neighbours, seasons, and time itself. So let's begin, shall we? What is the hidden life of plants, and how much is happening inside the green world that seems, at first glance, to be standing perfectly still? Plants are very good at giving the impression that nothing much is happening. A tree stands beside a road for so long that people begin to treat it like street furniture with leaves. A houseplant sits on a windowsill, apparently doing very little except leaning slightly toward the light and making its owner wonder whether it looks a bit sad. A blade of grass is walked on, rained on, dried out, frozen, eaten, and still somehow returns to the quiet business of being green. To human eyes, plants seem patient, silent, and mostly still. But this stillness is a little misleading. Inside every living plant, an immense amount is happening. Water is moving through narrow tubes. Sugars are being made, transported, stored, and spent. Cells are dividing at growing tips. Chemical messages are passing from one tissue to another. Roots are exploring soil in slow motion. Leaves are adjusting microscopic pores. Pigments are catching sunlight. Fungi, bacteria, insects, and neighbouring plants are all part of the same surrounding drama, even if the whole thing appears, from a distance, like a very calm garden. The hidden life of plants begins with this simple shift in perspective. Plants are not background decoration. They are living organisms built differently from animals, working on timescales that often fall outside ordinary human attention. They do not pace around the room. They do not blink. They do not suddenly make eye contact in a way that suggests they know too much. But they are constantly sensing, responding, growing, defending, competing, cooperating, and reshaping the world around them. Biologically, a plant is usually defined by several key features. Plants are multicellular organisms, meaning their bodies are made from many specialized cells working together. Most plant cells have strong cell walls made largely of cellulose, a tough carbohydrate that gives plant tissue structure and support. This is one reason a stem can stand upright, a leaf can hold its shape, and a tree can build itself into a living tower. Unlike animal cells, plant cells are not soft little bags drifting freely through life. They are more like tiny rooms with reinforced walls, though thankfully without the paperwork of actual construction. Many plants also contain chloroplasts, the green structures inside cells where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts hold chlorophyll, the pigment that helps capture light energy. Through photosynthesis, plants use energy from sunlight to build sugars from carbon dioxide and water, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process is one of the central reasons complex life on Earth exists in its familiar form. Plants are not merely living on the planet. In a very real sense, they help make the planet livable. Plants also grow in a distinctive way. Animals usually form most of their body plan early in life, then enlarge and mature. Plants, by contrast, keep producing new tissues from growth regions called meristems. These meristems sit at places such as root tips and shoot tips, where cells divide and create fresh plant body. A plant can continue adding leaves, branches, roots, flowers, and stems throughout its life. This gives plant bodies a modular quality. A tree is not just one fixed structure. It is a living system that keeps building new parts, while older parts support, protect, transport, or eventually die back. The scientific study of plants is called botany. It is one of the oldest branches of biology, because humans have always depended on plants for food, medicine, shelter, fuel, fibers, and survival. Long before microscopes and genetic sequencing, people were watching plants carefully because getting the green world wrong could be inconvenient at best and extremely poisonous at worst. Theophrastus, an ancient Greek thinker often called one of the early fathers of botany, wrote detailed descriptions of plants, their forms, uses, and growth habits. Many centuries later, Carl Linnaeus developed a classification system that helped organize living things into named groups, giving biology a clearer language for describing the vast variety of life. Those early efforts mattered because plants are astonishingly diverse. Mosses, ferns, grasses, orchids, cacti, oaks, seagrasses, water lilies, wheat, roses, and redwoods are all part of the broader plant story. Some hug damp rocks, some float in ponds, some survive deserts, some climb toward forest canopies, some grow from seed small enough to vanish in a fingertip crease, while others become trees so large they alter the light, moisture, and temperature around them. The plant kingdom is not a simple green blur. It is an enormous collection of life strategies. One reason plant life can feel hidden is that it often happens slowly. Human beings are tuned to human speed events. A bird taking flight, a cat pouncing, a dog hearing a crisp packet from another room. These are movements easy to notice. A plant turning toward light over hours, sending roots through soil over days, thickening wood over years, or changing a landscape over centuries requires a different kind of attention. Time-lapse photography helps reveal this slower world. A climbing vine searches the air in curling loops. A sunflower bud shifts with the light. Seedlings rise, bend, and unfold. Roots branch through soil like pale lightning slowed almost to stillness. Under a microscope, even more becomes visible. Cells divide, chloroplasts move, stomata open and close, fungal threads weave through soil, pollen grains germinate tubes. What appears motionless at arm's length becomes busy when viewed at the right scale. This is why the hidden life of plants is not hidden in the sense of being mysterious beyond science. Much of it is hidden because it is underground, microscopic, chemical, internal, or spread across time. A root system may be as important to a plant as everything visible above the soil, yet it is usually out of sight. A chemical signal may travel through tissues without making a sound. A leaf may alter its pores in response to heat and dryness without any visible drama. A seed may wait in the soil, apparently lifeless, until water, temperature, oxygen, and light create the right conditions for germination. Plants also reshape their surroundings more profoundly than their quiet appearance suggests. Forests influence rainfall, temperature, soil formation, carbon storage, and habitat structure. Grasses helped build some of the great grazing ecosystems of the world. Flowering plants form deep partnerships with insects, birds, bats, and other pollinators. Crops shaped human civilization, settlement, trade, diet, and culture. Even the oxygen in the air is tied to the long history of photosynthetic life, including ancient cyanobacteria, algae, and plants. To see plants only as passive scenery is to miss almost everything interesting about them. A plant is rooted, but not helpless. It cannot flee from a caterpillar, so it may produce bitter or toxic chemicals. It cannot walk toward water, so its roots grow through soil, guided by moisture, gravity, oxygen, and nutrients. It cannot shout for help, but damaged leaves can release volatile compounds into the air. It cannot choose a shady spot in the animal sense, but it can grow differently in shade, adjust leaf shape, and redirect resources. The life of plants is therefore a different way of being alive. It is slower, quieter, more distributed, and more chemical than the animal life most familiar to human imagination. A plant does not need a brain to be responsive. It does not need muscles to move. It does not need a nervous system to coordinate growth, defense, repair, and reproduction. Its body is organized around sunlight above, minerals and water below, and the constant negotiation between the two. That is the quiet strangeness at the heart of the green world. A plant may look like it is simply standing there, but standing there is not simple. It is a full-time biological operation, carried out through cells, tissues, pigments, hormones, roots, leaves, microbes, and time. The stillness is real, but it is not emptiness. It is activity slowed into silence. For most of Earth's history, there were no forests, no flowers, no grasses, no fruit, and no trees standing quietly under the sky. The land was bare for a very long time. Rock, dust, water, wind, heat, cold, and sunlight shaped the surface, but the green world that now feels so ordinary had not yet arrived. There were no roots gripping soil, because true soils had barely begun to form. There were no leaves catching light in the air. There was no moss on stone, no pollen drifting through spring, no seeds waiting in the dark. To understand how plants became plants, the story has to begin before plants themselves. The deepest roots of plant life reach back to ancient photosynthetic organisms, especially cyanobacteria. These were not plants, but bacteria capable of using sunlight to make chemical energy. Through oxygenic photosynthesis, cyanobacteria used light, water, and carbon dioxide, and released oxygen as a byproduct. Over immense spans of time, this changed the chemistry of the planet. The Great Oxidation Event, which began more than 2 billion years ago, marked one of the most important transformations in Earth's history. Oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere and oceans, creating new possibilities for life while also causing crisis for organisms that had evolved in a world with little free oxygen. It is slightly strange to think that a gas now associated with freshness, breathing, forests, and open windows was once a planetary pollutant to many forms of life. But oxygen is reactive, and early Earth was not prepared for it. The rise of oxygen altered minerals, ocean chemistry, metabolism, and evolution. It also helped make complex life more energetically possible, because oxygen can support highly efficient cellular respiration. Long before the first leaf appeared, photosynthesis was already changing the world that future plants would inherit. A crucial step came through endosymbiotic theory. This theory explains how some major structures inside complex cells began as once free-living organisms. Lynn Margulis was one of the most important scientists associated with developing and promoting this idea in its modern form. According to endosymbiotic theory, chloroplasts originated when an early eukaryotic cell took in a photosynthetic cyanobacterium. Instead of being digested, that cyanobacterium survived inside the host cell. Over time, the two became deeply integrated. The captured organism eventually became the chloroplast, the light-catching structure found in plant and algal cells. This idea may sound like a tiny ancient accident with enormous consequences, because that is more or less what it was. A cell swallowed another cell, and after a great deal of evolutionary negotiation, the future green world became possible. Chloroplasts still carry clues of that origin. They have their own genetic material and divide in a way that reflects their bacterial ancestry. Every green leaf is, in a sense, carrying the distant legacy of a partnership older than forests, older than flowers, and older than animals walking on land. The ancestors of land plants came from green algae. These algae lived in water, where support, moisture, and reproduction were very different problems from life on dry land. Water helped hold bodies up. It protected cells from drying. It allowed reproductive cells to move more easily. It softened the sharp edges of sunlight and temperature change. Leaving that world for land was not a simple stroll onto a beach. It was one of the major transitions in the history of life. Early land plants faced serious challenges. The first was drying out. A plant on land is surrounded by air, and air constantly draws water away. To survive, plants needed protective outer layers, such as a cuticle, to reduce water loss. They also needed ways to exchange gases without losing too much moisture. Another challenge was gravity. In water, buoyancy offers support. On land, a plant has to hold itself upright or remain very close to the surface. Ultraviolet radiation was also stronger outside the protection of water, so plants needed chemical and structural defenses against damage. Reproduction brought another difficulty. Many aquatic organisms can release reproductive cells into water, where movement is easier. On land, depending on freestanding water becomes risky. Early land plants still needed moisture for reproduction, which limited where they could live. Over time, later innovations such as pollen and seeds helped plants reproduce without relying so directly on wet surroundings. But before those developments, plant life was still tied closely to damp habitats. Some of the earliest surviving relatives of land plants include bryophytes, such as mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. These small plants do not have the same kind of vascular tissue found in trees, ferns, and flowering plants. They absorb water over their surfaces and remain close to damp environments. Mosses can seem simple, especially when they are politely carpeting a stone wall as if hired for decoration, but they represent an ancient way of being a land plant. Their life cycles still depend on water for the movement of sperm cells, which is why moisture remains so important to them. A major breakthrough came with vascular plants. These plants developed specialized internal transport tissues called xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water and dissolved minerals upward from roots. Phloem moves sugars and other organic substances from tissues that produce or store them to tissues that need them. This internal transport system changed almost everything. Plants were no longer limited to staying tiny and damp. They could move water through their bodies, support taller growth, and connect roots buried in soil with shoots reaching into light. Vascular tissue helped plants colonize drier environments and grow upward into the air. Height mattered because sunlight is a resource, and in a world of competing plants, reaching above neighbors can be a great advantage. Over evolutionary time, this helped produce larger and more complex plant forms, including ancient forests of club mosses, horsetails, and ferns. Long before familiar modern trees dominated landscapes, strange, tall plants were already building green architecture across the land. Seeds were another major milestone. A seed protects an embryo plant and provides stored food, allowing new plant life to pause, survive difficult conditions, and travel away from the parent. Pollen also changed reproduction by carrying male reproductive cells without requiring a film of water in the same way earlier plants did. These innovations allowed seed plants to spread into environments that would have been much harder for moisture-dependent plants. Later, flowering plants transformed the story again. Flowers helped organize reproduction around attraction, timing, color, scent, and relationships with animals. Fruit developed as a way to protect and disperse seeds, often by inviting animals to eat and transport them. This was not generosity in the human sense. It was evolution doing what evolution does best, turning a problem into a bargain. The plant gets movement, the animal gets food, Everyone behaves as if this was the plan all along. So plants became plants through a long chain of transformations, ancient photosynthesis, oxygen changing the planet, chloroplasts emerging through endosymbiosis, green algae adapting toward land, small moisture-loving plants spreading over damp surfaces, vascular tissues lifting plant bodies upward, and seeds, pollen, flowers, and fruit reshaping reproduction. The green world did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, step by step, across deep time, until bare rock became mossy, damp edges, became rooted, and the silent land began to breathe in green. A plant may look simple from the outside, especially when it is sitting politely in a pot, trying very hard not to be knocked over by someone opening the curtains. There is a green shoot, perhaps a few leaves, maybe a stem bending toward the window, and underneath, hidden in the soil, a root system quietly doing the sort of work that never gets enough credit. But the architecture of a plant is far more organized than it first appears. It is not just a green object. It is a living structure arranged around two great needs: gathering light above ground and gathering water and minerals below ground. The most familiar plant body plan has roots, stems, leaves, buds, flowers, seeds, and specialized growth regions called meristems. Roots anchor the plant and explore the soil. Stems hold leaves upward, transport materials, and connect the underground and above-ground parts of the body. Leaves are broad, light catching surfaces where much of the plant's photosynthesis takes place. Buds are compact growing points that can become new leaves, shoots, or flowers. Flowers are reproductive structures in flowering plants, while seeds carry the next generation in a protected, portable form. Even when a plant looks still, its body is built for constant adjustment. At the smallest level, this architecture begins with plant cells. Like animal cells, plant cells contain a nucleus, where much of the genetic information is stored, and mitochondria, where energy from food molecules is made usable for cellular work. But plant cells also have distinctive features. Their cell walls are made largely of cellulose, a strong carbohydrate that gives plant tissue shape and support. These walls help explain why a leaf can spread itself toward the light, why a stem can stand upright, and why wood can become strong enough to hold up a tree for centuries. Plant cells also often contain chloroplasts, the tiny green structures where photosynthesis occurs. Inside chloroplasts, pigments such as chlorophyll capture light energy and help convert carbon dioxide and water into sugars. A large central vacuole is another important feature in many plant cells. This fluid-filled compartment helps maintain internal pressure, known as turgor pressure. When plant cells are full of water, they press outward against their walls, helping leaves stay firm and stems remain upright. When water is lacking, that pressure drops, and the plant wilts. This is not the plant being dramatic, although it can certainly look like a small botanical tragedy on a windowsill. Plant cells are also connected to one another by tiny channels called plasmodesmata. These channels pass through cell walls and allow neighbouring cells to exchange certain molecules and signals. This matters because a plant body is not just a pile of sealed compartments. It is a connected living network, with tissues coordinating growth, defence, transport, and response across the whole organism. One of the most unusual features of plant architecture is that plants keep growing from meristems. Meristems are regions of active cell division, where new cells are produced throughout the plant's life. Apical meristems are found at the tips of roots and shoots. They allow roots to push deeper or wider through soil, and shoots to extend upward or outward into the air. This kind of growth is called primary growth, because it lengthens the plant body. It is how a seedling reaches above the surface, how a root tip explores a patch of damp soil, and how a young stem rises towards sunlight. In many woody plants, another kind of growth also occurs. This is secondary growth, which thickens stems and roots. Lateral meristems, especially the vascular cambium and cork cambium, are responsible for this widening. The vascular cambium produces new xylem and phloem, adding layers that allow trunks, branches and roots to become broader and stronger. The cork cambium contributes to outer protective tissues. This is why a tree does not simply become taller like a green pole stretched upward. It also becomes thicker, stronger, and better able to support its own increasing weight. The internal transport system of a plant is built around xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water and dissolved minerals, mostly upward from the roots to the stems and leaves. It is made partly from dead, hollow cells that form long tubes, creating pathways through which water can move. This movement is helped by transpiration, the loss of water vapour from leaves, which creates a pulling force through the plant. In a tall tree, this means water can travel from soil to canopy without a heart, pump, or tiny plant employee with a bucket. Phloem carries sugars and other organic compounds, moving them from places where they are made or stored to places where they are needed. A mature leaf may produce sugars through photosynthesis, while a growing root tip, flower bud, fruit, or developing seed may need those sugars as fuel and building material. Phloem can move materials in different directions depending on the plant's needs. Together, xylem and phloem form the plant's internal plumbing, linking the light-gathering world above the soil with the water-gathering world below it. In trees, this architecture becomes especially clear. Wood is mostly made of secondary xylem, built up year after year. Bark protects the outside of the stem, reducing water loss, shielding living tissues and helping defend against injury, insects, fire and disease. Just beneath the bark, the cambium remains active, producing new layers. In many temperate trees, annual growth rings form because wood produced during favourable growing conditions differs from wood produced later in the season. These rings can reveal the age of a tree and the conditions it experienced while growing. The study of tree rings is called dendrochronology. Scientists use it to investigate past climates, droughts, fires, volcanic eruptions, and even historical buildings made from timber. A tree trunk can therefore become a kind of slow diary, written not in words, but in layers of wood. Narrow rings may suggest difficult years, while wider rings may reflect better growing conditions. The tree does not comment on any of this, which is probably wise. It simply records. The architecture of a plant reflects the life strategy of an organism rooted in place. Because a plant cannot wander off to find lunch, its body must solve problems through growth and structure. Leaves spread into light, roots branch into soil, stems connect the two. Xylem lifts water, phloem distributes sugar, meristems keep adding new tissues, bark protects, wood supports. Flowers and seeds carry reproduction beyond the parent body. A plant's design is therefore not passive at all. It is a quiet arrangement of engineering, chemistry and growth, shaped by the need to live between sky and soil. Above ground, the plant reaches into air and light. Below ground, it enters the dark, mineral world of water, fungi and roots. Between the two, the stem becomes a bridge, holding together a life that is still to human eyes, but constantly being built from within. There is something quietly unreasonable about a leaf. It may look ordinary, resting in the light with no obvious ambition, but inside that thin green surface, sunlight is being turned into living matter. Not metaphorically, not poetically, although plants do make it very tempting to become poetic and slightly unbearable about it. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants, algae, and some bacteria use light energy to build sugar from carbon dioxide and water, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. It is one of the most important processes on Earth, because it links the energy of the sun to the living structure of the biosphere. The basic idea sounds almost too simple. Light arrives from the sun. A plant catches some of it. Carbon dioxide enters the leaf from the air. Water arrives from the roots. Inside the plant's cells, these ingredients are rearranged into energy-rich molecules that can be used to build and maintain the plant's body. The overall process can be written in words as carbon dioxide plus water, using light energy, becomes glucose plus oxygen. Behind that tidy sentence, however, is an astonishing chain of chemistry. The story of understanding photosynthesis develops slowly. Jan Ingenhousz, a Dutch physician and scientist working in the late 18th century, showed that green plants release oxygen when exposed to light. This was a crucial discovery because it revealed that plants were not simply growing from soil in some vague greenish way. Light mattered. Air mattered. The living plant was changing the air around it. Later, Melvin Calvin and his colleagues used radioactive carbon to trace how carbon dioxide becomes incorporated into organic molecules. That work helped reveal the pathway now called the Calvin cycle, one of the central processes by which carbon from the atmosphere enters living matter. The colour green comes largely from chlorophyll, the pigment found inside chloroplasts. Chlorophyll absorbs light especially well in the red and blue parts of the visible spectrum. It reflects and transmits more green light, which is why many leaves look green to human eyes. In a sense, the familiar colour of a forest is partly the colour that plants are not using as strongly. The green glow of leaves is not a fashion choice, though if it were, it would be an impressively consistent brand. Photosynthesis happens inside chloroplasts, the small structures within plant and algal cells that carry out the process. Inside each chloroplast are flattened membranes called thylakoids. These thylakoid membranes are where the light-dependent reactions take place. When chlorophyll and other pigments absorb light, that energy excites electrons, setting off a flow of energy through a chain of molecules. Water molecules are split, oxygen is released, and the chloroplast produces energy-carrying molecules that will be used in the next stage. This splitting of water is one reason photosynthesis is so important to the planet. The oxygen released by plants, algae, and cyanobacteria does not come from carbon dioxide as people often assume. It comes from water. The plant keeps the useful hydrogen and electrons for its chemistry, while oxygen is released into the air. Every breath taken by animals is tied, in the long story of Earth, to photosynthetic life splitting water under sunlight. The second major stage takes place in the stroma, the fluid-filled space around the thylakoids. This is where the Calvin cycle occurs. The Calvin cycle does not need light directly in the same immediate way as the light-dependent reactions, but it depends on the energy-carrying molecules produced by them. In this cycle, carbon dioxide is fixed into organic molecules. To fix carbon means to take carbon from an inorganic form in the air and build it into molecules that living things can use. Those carbon-based molecules can become sugars. From there, plants can make starch for storage, cellulose for cell walls, and many other compounds used in growth, repair, defense, and reproduction. A tree trunk, a blade of grass, a grain of wheat, and the flesh of an apple all owe their existence to carbon being drawn from the air and built into plant tissue. A plant is partly made from air, which sounds like a magic trick until chemistry quietly takes the credit. Photosynthesis supports most food webs. Plants and algae are primary producers, meaning they build organic matter from non-living ingredients using an external energy source. Herbivores eat plants, predators eat herbivores. Decomposers break down dead material and return nutrients to the system. Even animals that never eat a leaf directly are usually connected somewhere down the chain to photosynthetic organisms. In the oceans, microscopic phytoplankton perform a huge share of global photosynthesis, quietly drifting near the surface and helping power marine food webs. Photosynthesis also stores solar energy in chemical bonds. When a plant makes sugar, it is capturing a little of the sun's energy in a form that can be moved, stored, eaten, burned, buried, or transformed. Ancient photosynthesis helped create some of the organic material that, over geological time, became fossil fuels. Modern photosynthesis feeds crops, forests, grasslands, wetlands, and countless ecosystems. It does not capture all sunlight with perfect efficiency. In fact, much light is reflected, transmitted, lost as heat, or unavailable because of water, nutrients, temperature, and leaf design. But perfection is not required. Even modest efficiency, repeated across oceans, fields, forests, and billions upon billions of leaves, is enough to help run the living earth. So the quiet miracle of photosynthesis is not that plants do something impossible. It is that they do something real, precise, ancient, and planet-changing while looking almost completely relaxed. A leaf in sunlight is not merely resting there. It is handling photons, splitting water, fixing carbon, building sugar, releasing oxygen, and storing energy from a star, all without making a fuss, which is more than can be said for most kitchens during breakfast. A leaf is one of the most familiar shapes in nature, which makes it very easy to underestimate. It seems simple enough. A thin green surface, spread into the air, catching light in a quiet and leafy sort of way. But a leaf is not just a decoration attached to a stem. It is a specialized organ, shaped by the constant challenge of living between sunlight and dryness. It has to capture light, take in carbon dioxide, release oxygen, manage water, avoid overheating, and survive the hungry attention of insects that regard salad as a lifestyle. The flattened shape of many leaves is the first clue to their purpose. A broad, thin surface gives a plant a large area for catching sunlight, while keeping many photosynthetic cells close enough to the air for gas exchange. This is why so many leaves spread outward like little solar panels, although unlike solar panels, they also repair themselves, feed caterpillars, talk chemically to the rest of the plant, and occasionally turn magnificent colours in autumn as if they have remembered they are allowed to be theatrical. A typical leaf has several layers, each with a particular role. On the outside is the epidermis, a protective skin of cells covering the upper and lower surfaces. Over the epidermis lies the cuticle, a waxy layer that helps reduce water loss. The cuticle is especially important because a leaf faces a strange problem. To photosynthesize, it must open itself to the air. But opening to the air also means water can escape. A leaf is therefore always negotiating with the atmosphere, trying to gain carbon without quietly drying itself into botanical crisps. Inside the leaf, beneath the upper surface, is the palisade mesophyll. This layer is usually packed with elongated cells containing many chloroplasts, making it one of the main sites of photosynthesis. The cells are arranged to absorb light efficiently, especially in leaves exposed to bright conditions. Below that is the spongy mesophyll, a looser tissue with air spaces between the cells. These spaces allow gases to move through the leaf, so carbon dioxide can reach photosynthetic cells and oxygen can move away. Running through the leaf are veins, which are not quite like animal veins, but serve a similarly important transport role. Leaf veins contain xylem and phloem. Xylem brings water and dissolved minerals from the roots into the leaf. Phloem carries sugars made by photosynthesis away to the parts of the plant that need them, such as growing roots, developing fruits, young leaves, storage tissues, or flowers. The pattern of veins also supports the leaf physically, helping it spread into the light without collapsing into a sad green handkerchief. Among the most important structures in a leaf are stomata. These are tiny adjustable pores, often more abundant on the lower surface of a leaf. Though their position varies among plant species, each stoma is controlled by two guard cells. When guard cells take up water and become swollen, the pore opens. When they lose water and become less turgid, the pore closes. Through stomata, carbon dioxide enters the leaf for photosynthesis, while oxygen and water vapour leave. This creates one of the great compromises of plant life. Carbon dioxide is needed to build sugars, but water is constantly being lost through the same openings. On a cool, damp day, keeping stomata open may be relatively safe. On a hot, dry afternoon, open stomata can become expensive. Plants therefore regulate stomatal opening in response to light, water availability, carbon dioxide levels, humidity, temperature, and internal chemical signals such as abscisic acid. A leaf may look peaceful, but at microscopic scale, it is managing a very serious moisture budget. The evaporation of water from leaves is called transpiration. As water evaporates from the moist surfaces inside the leaf and exits through stomata, it creates a pulling force within the xylem. This pull helps draw water upward from the roots, through the stem and into the leaves. The process depends partly on cohesion, the tendency of water molecules to stick to one another, and adhesion, their tendency to stick to the walls of xylem vessels. In tall trees, transpiration helps lift water astonishing distances without a mechanical pump. The tree does not need a heart. It uses physics, structure, and sunlight, which is very efficient and also pleasantly quiet. Leaves vary enormously because environments vary enormously. In dry climates, many plants have small, thick, waxy or hairy leaves that reduce water loss. Some desert plants reduce leaves into spines, shifting much photosynthesis into green stems. In conifers such as pines and spruces, needle-like leaves have a small surface area, thick cuticles, and other features that help them survive cold, dry, or nutrient-poor conditions. A pine needle may not look luxurious, but it is wonderfully practical, like the sensible coat of the plant world. In shaded forests, leaves are often broader and thinner, helping capture limited light beneath a canopy. Shade-tolerant plants may arrange their leaves carefully to avoid overlapping too much, spreading them where small patches of light can be caught. In aquatic plants, floating leaves such as those of water lilies have their own adaptations. Their stomata are often on the upper surface, where they can exchange gases with the air, while their broad shape helps them rest on the water and intercept sunlight. Even on the same plant, leaves may differ depending on conditions. Sun leaves, which develop in bright light, are often smaller, thicker and richer in photosynthetic machinery per unit area. Shade leaves tend to be thinner, broader, and arranged to gather weaker light efficiently. Plants can adjust growth patterns, pigment levels, leaf thickness, and leaf angles in response to the light around them. This flexibility allows a rooted organism to fine-tune its body without moving to a better address. Leaf design is also shaped by threats. A leaf rich in sugars, proteins, and water is attractive to herbivores, fungi, and bacteria. Plants respond with tough tissues, hairs, waxes, bitter chemicals, toxins, and sometimes rapid chemical signals after damage. A leaf must be open enough to gather light and air, but protected enough not to become lunch too easily. So a leaf is a compromise made visible. It is a surface for catching sunshine, a breathing organ, a cooling system, a water risk manager, a sugar factory, and a defensive frontier. Its thinness is not simplicity. Its greenness is not idleness. Every leaf is a quiet negotiation between light and water, growth and danger, openness and protection. And when sunlight rests on a leaf, the plant is not merely basking. It is working, balancing, building, and surviving in the most elegant way it can. The easiest part of a plant to notice is usually the part above the soil. Leaves catch the light, stems lift themselves into the air, flowers wave their bright little flags at passing insects, and trees perform the impressive trick of being both enormous and apparently relaxed. But much of a plant's life is hidden beneath the surface in the darker, quieter world of roots, soil pores, fungal threads, microbial communities, and thin films of mineral-rich water. Soil is not just dirt with better public relations. It is a living environment full of spaces, particles, chemistry, and organisms. Between grains of sand, silt, clay, and organic matter are tiny pores that hold air and water. Around those particles, water forms thin films carrying dissolved minerals such as nitrate, phosphate, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. A plant's roots grow into this complicated world, not simply as anchors, but as active explorers. Roots hold the plant in place, which is already quite important when the top half is trying to spread itself into wind and weather. But anchoring is only the beginning. Roots absorb water, take up mineral nutrients, store carbohydrates, sense gravity, detect moisture, respond to oxygen levels, and adjust growth depending on what they encounter. In many plants, roots also store energy, as in carrots, beetroots, cassava, and sweet potatoes. These storage roots are not designed for human soups and Sunday dinners, despite how convenient that has turned out to be. They are survival reserves, built by the plant for its own future growth. At the growing tips of roots, cells divide and push forward through soil. Behind those tips are root hairs, tiny extensions of individual root cells. Root hairs greatly increase the surface area available for absorption. This matters because water and minerals are not usually sitting in the soil like a neatly poured drink waiting for a straw. They are held around soil particles, dissolved in films of water, or locked into chemical forms that are not always easy for plants to use. Root hairs bring the plant into close contact with this microscopic landscape. But roots are not alone. Around them is the rhizosphere, the narrow zone of soil influenced by root activity. Plants release sugars, amino acids, organic acids, and other compounds from their roots, feeding and shaping the microbial community nearby. In return, bacteria and fungi can influence nutrient availability, plant health, disease resistance, and growth. The rhizosphere is like a busy underground market, except everything is microscopic, damp, and no one has brought a sensible shopping bag. One of the most important partnerships in this hidden world is between plant roots and mycorrhizal fungi. The word mycorrhiza refers to a close association between fungi and plant roots. Albert Bernhard Frank, a 19th century German biologist, helped establish the scientific understanding of mycorrhiza as a genuine partnership rather than a disease. In this mutualism, the fungus grows through the soil in fine threads called hyphae, extending far beyond the immediate reach of roots. These fungal threads can absorb nutrients and water from tiny spaces roots cannot easily reach. The plant, meanwhile, supplies the fungus with sugars made through photosynthesis. This exchange is one of the great quiet bargains of terrestrial life. The plant gives carbon-rich food. The fungus helps gather resources such as phosphorus, nitrogen, and water. Phosphorus is especially important because it is needed for genetic material, membranes, and energy transfer in cells, but it can be difficult for plants to access in many soils. Mycorrhizal fungi can make that hidden nutrient world more available. In forests, these relationships can become especially complex. Suzanne Simard is well known for research on forest mycorrhizal networks, particularly in relation to how trees and fungi can exchange carbon and signals under certain conditions. Her work helped bring public attention to the idea that forest plants are connected below ground. But this area needs careful handling. There is good evidence that mycorrhizal networks can be involved in resource movement, chemical signalling, and interactions between plants. There is much less reason to describe forests as if trees are chatting with clear intentions, making plans, or holding leafy committee meetings beneath the soil. The popular phrase, wood wide web, can be useful as a doorway into the idea, but it can also be misleading. Fungal networks are not the internet with mushrooms. They are living biological systems shaped by growth, chemistry, competition, cooperation, and context. A signal moving through a network does not mean a plant has human-like thoughts. Resource transfer does not mean generosity in the emotional sense. The real science is already fascinating enough without giving the trees tiny office jobs. Another crucial underground partnership involves nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen is abundant in the atmosphere, but most plants cannot use atmospheric nitrogen gas directly. They need nitrogen in usable chemical forms, such as ammonium or nitrate. Martinus Beijerinck was an important figure in identifying the role of microbes in nitrogen fixation. In legumes such as peas, beans, clover, and lentils, bacteria called rhizobium can live in specialized root nodules. Inside these nodules, the bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms the plant can use. In return, the plant provides sugars and a protected environment. This relationship is one reason legumes have been so valuable in agriculture. They can enrich soils with biologically available nitrogen, especially when plant material and roots are returned to the ground. Farmers have used legumes in crop rotations for centuries, long before the microscopic details were understood. The plants were quietly cooperating with bacteria, and humans, with unusual wisdom for once, noticed that the soil seemed better afterward. Roots also compete. They grow toward water, branch in nutrient-rich patches, and interact with the roots of neighbouring plants. Some plants release chemical compounds that affect competitors, a process called allelopathy. Others form dense mats of roots that help them dominate a patch of soil. Underground life is therefore not purely peaceful. It is an exchange network, a battlefield, a pantry, a plumbing system, and a sensory landscape all at once. This is why the hidden life of plants feels especially hidden beneath the soil. Above ground, a plant may look like a single quiet organism. Below ground, it is part of a living web of roots, fungi, bacteria, minerals, water, and chemical messages. The root system is not just a tangle. It is a working frontier where the plant meets the earth directly and negotiates for everything it cannot get from sunlight. A plant does not walk away from shade, crawl toward water, or step politely around an obstacle in the path. It has no legs, no muscles, no joints, and no nervous system directing movement in the animal sense. And yet, plants move constantly. They bend, twist, climb, open, close, turn, curl, reach, and grow around the world with a quiet persistence that only seems motionless because human attention is usually too impatient to catch it. Plant movement is mostly built from growth, water pressure, cellular expansion, and specialized structures. Instead of moving a limb with muscle, a plant may grow more on one side than the other, causing a shoot to curve. It may shift water between cells, changing pressure and shape. It may open petals at dawn, close leaves at night, or send a tendril around a support. The result is movement without walking, action without muscles, and a kind of slow choreography that becomes obvious only when time is allowed to gather. One of the most important forms of plant movement is called a tropism. A tropism is a directional growth response to a stimulus. Phototropism is growth toward or away from light. Shoots often bend toward light because light is the energy source for photosynthesis, and a leaf in better light can make more sugar. Gravitropism is growth in response to gravity. Roots usually show positive gravitropism by growing downward, while shoots usually show negative gravitropism by growing upward. This helps a young seedling organize itself even before it reaches the surface, with roots heading into the soil and shoots heading toward the air. There is also thigmotropism, a growth response to touch. Climbing plants use this beautifully. A tendril that brushes against a branch, fence, or neighbouring stem may begin to coil around it, giving the plant support as it climbs toward brighter light. Hydrotropism is growth in response to water, especially in roots. A root system does not simply expand at random. It can alter its growth depending on moisture, gravity, oxygen, nutrients, and obstacles in the soil. The plant stays rooted, but its body explores. Charles Darwin and Francis Darwin studied plant movement with remarkable care. In their work on grass coleoptiles, the protective sheaths surrounding young shoots in grasses, they investigated how plants bend toward light. They showed that the tip of the young shoot was important in detecting light, while the bending occurred lower down. This helped to lay the groundwork for later research into plant hormones and growth responses. It was a wonderfully patient kind of science, watching seedlings lean, bend, and reveal their rules in tiny gestures. A central chemical in many growth movements is auxin. Auxin is a major plant hormone involved in cell elongation, growth direction, and development. In shoots exposed to light from one side, auxin tends to accumulate more on the shaded side. There it promotes cell elongation. As the cells on the shaded side grow longer than those on the lit side, the shoot bends toward the light. The plant is not deciding to lean in the way an animal might decide to turn its head. It is responding through chemistry, growth, and unequal cellular expansion. Still, the result is elegant. The plant turns itself toward what it needs. Not all plant movements depend on growth. Some are nastic movements, which are responses that do not depend on the direction of the stimulus in the same way tropisms do. The sensitive plant Mimosa pudica is a famous example. When touched, its leaflets fold rapidly. This movement depends on changes in water pressure inside specialized structures at the bases of the leaflets. Water shifts, cells lose turgor pressure, and the leaf folds. The response may help deter herbivores, reduce damage, or make the plant look suddenly less appetizing. It is the botanical equivalent of saying, very quietly, absolutely not. The Venus flytrap is even more dramatic. Its trap is a modified leaf with sensitive trigger hairs. When an insect touches the hairs in the right sequence, electrical and hydraulic changes help the trap snap shut. The repeated stimulation requirement reduces false alarms, so the plant does not waste energy closing around a raindrop, a bit of dust, or some other deeply disappointing non-meal. Once closed around real prey, the trap can seal more tightly and release digestive enzymes. The Venus flytrap still relies on photosynthesis, but in nutrient-poor habitats, capturing insects provides valuable nitrogen and other nutrients. Many plant movements are too slow to notice without help. Time-lapse photography changes that. A climbing vine suddenly seems to search the air in sweeping circles. Flowers open and close like slow breathing. Leaves tilt toward light, seedlings stretch upward, and roots branch through soil with pale, delicate determination. What looked like stillness becomes motion. What looked like passivity becomes response. These movements do not mean plants have animal-like intentions. A vine is not thinking about a fence. A shoot is not admiring the window. A Venus flytrap is not sitting there with villainous patience, although it does have the appearance of a tiny green monster with excellent timing. Plant movement is not conscious movement in the familiar animal sense, but it is real, adaptive, and often beautifully precise. A rooted life demands this kind of movement. Because a plant cannot relocate its whole body, it must move by growing, bending, adjusting, opening, closing, and reshaping itself. It moves through time rather than across the ground. It answers light with curvature, gravity with direction, touch with coiling, dryness with roots, and danger with sudden folding or chemical change. The hidden life of plants is not still after all. It is simply moving in a language slower than footsteps. Plants do not have brains, nerves, eyes, ears, or anything that resembles an anxious little command center, wondering whether the weather is about to become rude. Yet they detect the world around them with remarkable sensitivity. They respond to light, gravity, touch, water, temperature, injury, infection, neighbors, seasons, and the chemical condition of the soil. They do this without thoughts in the animal sense and without a nervous system. Their hidden life is built from receptors, hormones, electrical changes, gene activity, and chemical pathways that pass information through tissues. This is one of the most important ideas in plant biology. Sensing does not require a brain. A living cell can detect changes in its surroundings and alter its behavior. In plants, this ability is organized across roots, stems, leaves, flowers, seeds, and growing tips. A root tip can respond to gravity and moisture. A leaf can respond to light and dryness. A stem can bend as one side grows faster than the other. A damaged tissue can trigger chemical defenses elsewhere in the plant. None of this means a plant is thinking like an animal. It means life has more than one way of paying attention. Plant hormones are central to this quiet coordination. Auxin helps regulate growth, especially cell elongation, and directional bending toward light. Gibberellins are involved in stem growth, seed germination, and flowering in some plants. Cytokinins help control cell division and can influence shoot growth and aging. Abscisic acid is strongly linked with stress responses, especially drought, because it helps close stomata and reduce water loss. ethylene is a gas hormone involved in fruit ripening, leaf fall, and responses to stress. Jasmonets help organize defenses against herbivores, while salicylic acid is important in responses to pathogens. Together, these chemicals form part of the plant's internal messaging system. The word hormone can make the plant sound almost animal-like, but plant hormones are not little decision-makers, they are chemical signals. Their meaning depends on concentration, location, timing, tissue type, and interactions with other signals. Auxin in one place may encourage growth, while in another context it may shape branching or development. Abscisic acid during drought can help a plant survive by closing stomata, even though that also limits carbon dioxide intake. Plant life is full of these compromises. The plant must grow, but not dry out. It must defend itself, but not spend all its energy on defense. Very relatable, in a leafy sort of way. Light sensing is especially sophisticated. Plants do not have eyes, but they have photoreceptors, molecules that detect particular kinds of light. Phytochromes allow plants to sense red and far-red light. This matters because leaves absorb red light strongly, but allow more far-red light to pass through or reflect away. When a plant detects a higher proportion of far-red light, it may be sensing shade from neighbouring plants. In response, it may lengthen stems, adjust leaf growth, or change flowering behaviour. Phytochromes also help plants measure day length and seasonal timing, linking light conditions to reproduction and dormancy. Other photoreceptors include cryptochromes and phototropins. Cryptochromes respond mainly to blue light, and are involved in circadian rhythms, seedling development, and flowering control. Phototropins also detect blue light and help guide phototropism, the bending of shoots toward light. They are involved in chloroplast movement inside cells and in stomatal opening. These systems allow a plant to read light not as one simple brightness, but as information about direction, colour, shade, time of day, and season. Plants can also use electrical signalling. This must be handled carefully because electrical signals in plants are not the same as thoughts moving through an animal brain. Still, plant cells can produce rapid changes in electrical voltage across their membranes. The Venus flytrap is the famous example. When its trigger hairs are touched in the right pattern, action potential-like signals help initiate the closing of the trap. Similar electrical changes can occur in other plants after wounding, touch, or environmental stress. These signals can move faster than many chemical messages, helping different parts of the plant respond to a local event. This is where the subject can easily drift into exaggeration. Some researchers, including Monica Gagliano, have explored debated ideas about plant learning and memory-like behaviour, often using experiments with plants such as Mimosa pudica. Her work has attracted both interest and criticism. It is useful to mention such research carefully, because it sits near the boundary between mainstream plant physiology and more controversial interpretations. Plants clearly show habituation-like responses in some experiments and can change future responses based on previous conditions, but describing this as learning in the same sense as animal learning can be misleading unless the terms are defined very precisely. The safest and most accurate view is still wonderfully interesting. Plants are not conscious in the way humans are conscious. They do not need to be. Their signalling is sophisticated because their survival depends on it. A rooted organism cannot run from drought, shade, insects, fungi, or a badly behaved goat. It must sense conditions early, adjust growth, close pores, make toxins, strengthen tissues, attract allies, release warning chemicals, or change its timing. A plant's hidden life is therefore not a secret mind. It is a living network of detection and response, spread through cells and tissues. It is chemistry taking the place of footsteps, growth taking the place of escape, and sensitivity taking the place of sight. The plant remains rooted, but it is not unaware. It is reading the world in its own quiet language, one signal at a time. Plants do not simply wake up when the sun appears and shut down when darkness returns. Their lives are timed from within. Beneath the quiet surface of leaves, roots, buds, and flowers, plants keep track of daily and seasonal rhythms using internal biological cycles. These rhythms do not tick like a clock on a wall, and they certainly do not involve a tiny green alarm bell going off inside a stem. But they help plants coordinate growth, photosynthesis, water use, flowering, dormancy, and survival with the repeating patterns of the outside world. The most familiar of these internal cycles is the circadian rhythm. A circadian rhythm is a roughly daily biological cycle that continues even when external conditions stay constant. It allows an organism to anticipate regular changes rather than merely react after they happen. For a plant, this matters enormously. Sunrise, sunset, temperature shifts, moisture changes, and the behavior of pollinators often follow daily patterns. A plant that can prepare for these changes has an advantage over one that is always slightly late to the party, which in plant terms may mean wasting water, missing light, or opening a flower when nobody useful is visiting. One of the classic observations in the history of biological timekeeping came from Jean-Jacques d'Ortu de Mérun in the 18th century. He studied mimosa plants, whose leaves move between open and folded positions across the day. When he kept the plants in darkness, the leaves still continued their daily movement for a while. This suggested that the rhythm was not only a direct response to sunlight. Something inside the plant was helping keep time. It was a simple observation, but a powerful one. Even in darkness, the plant carried a memory of the day. Circadian rhythms help plants prepare for sunrise before it arrives. Photosynthesis depends on light, but the machinery involved takes time to organize. By timing gene activity, enzyme production, and chloroplast function, a plant can be ready to make use of morning light efficiently. Stomata, the tiny adjustable pores on leaves, are also influenced by internal rhythms. They may begin preparing to open before daylight fully returns, allowing carbon dioxide to enter for photosynthesis, while still balancing the danger of water loss. Growth is also timed. Some plants grow more at night, when water stress may be lower and tissues can expand more easily. Others adjust leaf position during the day to capture light, reduce overheating, or avoid excessive exposure. These movements and adjustments are not random. They are tied to internal gene networks, light signals, hormone levels, sugar status, and temperature. The plant is not watching a clock. It is measuring the world through chemistry and changing its body accordingly. Plants also measure longer patterns through photoperiodism, the response to day length and night length. This is especially important for flowering. Some plants are called short-day plants because they flower when nights become long enough. Others are long-day plants, flowering when nights become short enough. Day-neutral plants are less dependent on day length and may flower according to age, size, temperature, or other cues. The names can be slightly misleading, because in many cases plants are really measuring the length of darkness rather than the length of daylight. The night, quietly enough, is doing more of the scheduling than it gets credit for. Photoperiodism allows plants to flower at times when conditions are more favourable. A plant that flowers too early may face frost. A plant that flowers too late may miss pollinators, lose seed development time, or meet the wrong season entirely. By reading the changing balance of light and darkness, plants connect reproduction to the calendar of the environment. Seasonal timing reaches even further. In temperate regions, many trees enter bud dormancy before winter. Buds form protective scales, growth slows, and the plant reduces its vulnerability to cold. Leaf fall in deciduous trees is also carefully controlled. Before leaves drop, useful nutrients are withdrawn and stored, while the connection between leaf and stem weakens. The autumn leaf does not simply give up. It is dismissed with surprising administrative efficiency. Seeds also use timing cues. Germination may depend on water, oxygen, temperature, light, or periods of cold. Some seeds remain dormant until conditions suggest a better chance of survival. Vernalization is another important seasonal process, where exposure to winter cold helps certain plants become ready to flower later. This prevents them from flowering during a brief warm spell before winter has truly passed. It is a kind of biological caution, which is sensible when the weather has a habit of being dramatic. Plants measure time through several overlapping systems. Light is detected by photoreceptors such as phytochromes and cryptochromes. Temperature affects growth, dormancy, and flowering pathways. Internal gene networks rise and fall in activity across daily cycles. Hormones such as abscisic acid, gibberellins, auxin, and ethylene help translate timing information into growth, closure, opening, aging, and development. The hidden life of plants is therefore not only about reacting to the present, it is also about preparing for what usually comes next. A plant anticipates morning, adjusts to night, waits through winter, times flowering, protects buds, delays seeds, and follows the slow turning of the year. It is rooted in one place, but it is not trapped in one moment. It carries time inside itself, quietly counting light, darkness, warmth, cold, and the patient rhythm of the seasons. A flower can look like the decorative part of a plant, the little flourish added at the end, as if the plant had done the sensible work of making roots, stems, and leaves, then decided to become charming for no obvious reason. But flowers are not botanical ornaments. They are reproductive structures, and in flowering plants, known as angiosperms, they are central to the production of seeds. Their colours, shapes, scents, and patterns are part of one of the most important bargains in the living world. At the heart of this bargain is pollen. Pollen carries the male reproductive cells of flowering plants. For a seed to form, pollen must reach the part of the flower that contains the ovules. After fertilization, those ovules can become seeds, each carrying a new plant embryo. In many flowering plants, this transfer depends on wind, water, insects, birds, bats, or other animals. A flower may seem still, but it is often built around movement, the movement of pollen from one place to another. A typical flower has several main parts. Sepals usually form the outer protective structures around the flower bud before it opens. Petals are often the colourful or scented parts that attract animal visitors, though not all petals are bright and showy. Stamens are the male reproductive structures. Each stamen usually includes a filament and an anther, and the anther produces pollen. The female reproductive structures are called carpels. A carpel includes the stigma, which receives pollen, the style, which connects downward, and the ovary, which contains ovules. If fertilization succeeds, the ovules can become seeds, and the ovary can develop into fruit. This is the quiet machinery behind a blossom. The petals may be lovely, but their loveliness often has a job. They guide visitors, advertise rewards, frame landing platforms, and make the flower visible against leaves or soil. Some flowers are shaped for particular pollinators, while others are more open and general, welcoming a wider range of insects with the relaxed confidence of a cafe that does not mind who comes in, provided they leave covered in pollen. Pollination is a biological transfer system. Wind-pollinated plants, such as many grasses, often produce large amounts of light pollen and may have small plain flowers without nectar or strong scent. They do not need to impress a bee. They release pollen into moving air and accept the inefficiency of chance. Water pollination is less common, but occurs in some aquatic plants. Animal pollination is often more targeted. Bees, butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, bats, flies, beetles and other animals visit flowers for nectar, pollen, scent compounds, oils or shelter, and pollen is moved as a consequence. Charles Darwin was fascinated by these relationships. His work on orchid pollination showed how closely flower structures and pollinator bodies could fit together. One famous example involved the Madagascar star orchid, which has an exceptionally long nectar spur. Darwin reasoned that there must be a moth with a long enough tongue to reach the nectar. Later, a hawk moth fitting that prediction was identified. It remains one of the clearest examples of how careful observation and evolutionary thinking can reveal a hidden relationship before the animal itself is even seen doing the job. Flowers and pollinators often shape one another through coevolution. Coevolution means that two or more species influence each other's evolution over time. A flower with a deeper tube may favour insects with longer tongues. An insect that specialises on certain flowers may become better at finding and handling them. Colour, scent, nectar, shape, timing, and patterns visible in ultraviolet light can all guide animal visitors. Bees, for example, can see ultraviolet patterns that humans cannot, and some flowers have nectar guides that point toward the reward like tiny glowing runway markings. Not every floral bargain is perfectly honest. Many flowers offer nectar or pollen as a reward, but some use deception. Certain orchids mimic the scent or appearance of female insects, attracting males that attempt to mate with the flower and carry pollen away in the process. Some flowers smell like rotting flesh to attract flies or beetles that normally visit decaying matter. To human noses, this may seem unfortunate. To the plant, it is marketing. Not polite marketing, perhaps, but effective enough to have survived. Pollinators are not decorative extras either. Bees are among the best known, especially because many crops and wild plants depend on insect pollination. Butterflies and moths can carry pollen between flowers with long tubes. Hummingbirds visit tubular flowers rich in nectar, often favouring bright colours. Bats pollinate some night-opening flowers, especially in tropical regions. Flies, often underappreciated, pollinate many plants as well, including some that do not smell as delightful as a garden centre would prefer. The rise of flowering plants transformed terrestrial ecosystems. Angiosperms became especially diverse after their emergence during the age of dinosaurs, spreading into forests, grasslands, wetlands, mountains, and deserts. Their relationships with pollinators helps generate an enormous variety of forms and strategies. Flowers changed not only plant reproduction, but also the evolution of insects, birds, mammals, and the structure of many habitats. Pollination is also deeply tied to human life. Many fruits, nuts, seeds, and vegetables depend partly or heavily on animal pollination. Apples, almonds, berries, pumpkins, cocoa, coffee, and many other crops are connected to the work of pollinators. Even where staple grains are wind-pollinated or self-pollinated, animal pollination adds variety, nutrition, and economic value to food systems. It supports wild plant diversity too, which in turn supports insects, birds, mammals, soils, and ecosystems. So a flower is not simply a pleasant face turned toward the sun. It is a meeting point, a signal, a structure of persuasion, and sometimes a small, fragrant trick. It holds the possibility of seed, fruit, and future growth. Around it, animals move, pollen travels, and entire ecosystems are quietly stitched together. The hidden bargain is simple but powerful. The flower offers something, the visitor carries something, and life continues through the exchange. A seed is one of nature's quietest forms of suspense. It can sit in soil, in a fruit, in a drawer, in a bird's stomach, or in the frozen security of a seed vault, looking like almost nothing is happening. It does not breathe in any obvious way. It does not uncurl, blink, shuffle, or make a dramatic announcement. And yet, inside that small dry package may be the beginning of a root, a shoot, a leaf, a flower, a tree, a meadow, or an entire future meal. A seed is plant life paused, protected, and waiting for the world to become suitable. Biologically, a seed is a living package. It usually contains an embryo plant, a supply of stored food, and a protective seed coat. The embryo is the young plant in miniature, with the potential to produce a root and shoot. The stored food may be in the seed leaves, known as cotyledons, or in a tissue called endosperm, depending on the type of plant. The seed coat protects the contents from drying, damage, microbes, and sometimes digestion. This small structure allows plant life to do something extremely powerful: stop. That ability to pause changed the history of plants on land. Earlier plants often reproduced with spores, which are usually single cells or small groups of cells that can grow into new organisms under the right conditions. Spores are important and ancient, and plants such as mosses and ferns still use them. But seeds offered something different. A seed could carry a developing embryo with stored nourishment and protection. It could survive harder conditions, travel farther, and wait longer before growth began. For life on land, where dryness, cold, heat, and uncertain timing are constant problems, this was a major evolutionary advantage. Fruit added another layer to the story. In flowering plants, fruit develops from mature plant tissue, usually from the ovary of the flower after fertilization. Its job is not simply to be sweet, colourful, and convenient in a lunchbox, although humanity has certainly appreciated that side of the arrangement. Fruit protects seeds and often helps move them away from the parent plant. This matters because a seed that drops directly beneath its parent may face shade, competition, disease, and hungry animals already familiar with the area. Dispersal gives new plant life a chance to begin somewhere else. Some fruits are eaten by animals. A berry, apple, fig, or tomato may attract birds, mammals, or reptiles with colour, scent, softness, and sugar. The animal eats the fruit, carries the seeds inside its body, and later deposits them elsewhere, often with a small packet of fertilizer that no one asked to discuss in polite company. Other fruits and seeds use wind. Dandelions release tiny parachutes that drift through the air. Maples spin their winged seeds like little helicopters. Some seeds travel by water, such as coconuts, whose buoyant fruits can float across sea or river before reaching a new shore. Other seeds are less graceful, but very effective. Burrs cling to fur, feathers, clothing, and socks with a stubbornness that feels almost personal. Their hooks allow them to hitchhike on passing animals, spreading away from the parent plant. Some seed pods use mechanical force. When they dry, tension builds in the pod walls until the structure suddenly twists or splits, flinging seeds outward. Explosive seed dispersal sounds dramatic, and to be fair, for a plant it rather is. A quiet stem suddenly becoming a tiny botanical catapult is not nothing. Before a seed grows, it may enter dormancy. Dormancy is a state in which growth is delayed even if the seed is alive. This helps prevent germination at the wrong time. A seed that sprouts during a brief warm spell before winter may not survive. One that germinates before enough rain has arrived may dry out. Dormancy allows seeds to wait until conditions are more favourable. The hormone abscisic acid is often involved in maintaining dormancy, while gibberellins help promote germination when conditions are right. Germination begins when a seed receives the cues it needs. Water is usually essential because it rehydrates tissues and restarts metabolism. Oxygen is needed for cellular respiration. Temperature can signal the right season. Some seeds respond to light, while others germinate better in darkness. Some need cold exposure, heat, smoke chemicals after fire, or damage to the seed coat before they begin. This may sound fussy, but it is really a form of survival timing. A seed is not being difficult. It is trying very hard not to start life on a terrible day. When germination begins, the first root usually emerges and grows downward, anchoring the seedling and seeking water. Then the shoot grows upward toward light. Stored food supports the young plant until its leaves can photosynthesize. The transition is delicate. A seedling must move from protected pause to active growth, from hidden possibility to exposed life. Because seeds carry genetic diversity, they are also precious beyond individual plants. Seed banks preserve seeds from crops and wild species, protecting possibilities for future agriculture, conservation, and research. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, built into Arctic rock on the Norwegian island of Spitsbergen, stores backup samples of seeds from around the world. The Millennium Seed Bank at Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, focuses especially on conserving wild plant species. These places are not ordinary storage rooms. They are libraries of living potential, kept cold and dry so future generations may still have access to plant diversity that might otherwise be lost. A seed can look lifeless because it is quiet, but quiet is not the same as dead. Inside the right seed, under the right conditions, metabolism can restart, tissues can swell, roots can break through, and a new plant can enter the world. Some seeds remain viable for many years, while others have much shorter lives. Their patience depends on species, storage conditions, moisture, temperature, and chance. This is the hidden life of plants in one of its most concentrated forms. A seed is a pause button, a travel capsule, a survival strategy, and a promise. Fruit may carry it, wind may lift it, water may float it, fur may drag it, soil may bury it, time may pass over it. And then, when the world becomes just suitable enough, the stillness opens and a plant begins again. A plant cannot run from a caterpillar. It cannot step away from a fungus, slap a beetle, or move to a safer neighbourhood when the local goat begins making eye contact. Rooted life has many advantages, but escape is not one of them. So plants survive in a different way. They defend themselves with structure, chemistry, rapid signalling, and alliances with other organisms. Their stillness is not weakness. It is more like the calm exterior of a very well-stocked fortress. Some defences are easy to see. Thorns, spines, and prickles make eating a plant more difficult, painful, or simply not worth the effort. These words are often used casually as if they all mean the same thing, but botanically they can have different origins. Thorns are modified stems or branches, spines are often modified leaves or leaf parts, and prickles grow from the outer tissues, as in roses. To a hungry animal, the technical distinction may matter less than the immediate message, which is usually something like, "Please chew elsewhere." Leaves themselves can be built defensively. Some are tough, leathery, or fibrous, making them harder to bite and digest. Bark protects stems and trunks, shielding living tissues from weather, insects, disease, and injury. Waxy coatings reduce water loss, but can also make surfaces harder for small attackers to grip or penetrate. Some grasses and other plants contain silica bodies, tiny deposits of silica that can wear down the teeth and mouth parts of herbivores. Other plants use stinging hairs. The common nettle, for example, delivers irritating chemicals through tiny needle-like structures, creating a memorable educational experience for bare ankles. But the most hidden defences are chemical. Plants produce a huge variety of compounds called secondary metabolites. These are not usually part of the basic machinery of growth in the way sugars, proteins, and genetic material are. Instead, they often help plants survive by deterring herbivores, resisting microbes, attracting allies, competing with neighbours, or coping with environmental stress. Major groups include alkaloids, tannins, terpenes, phenolics, and glucosinolates. The names sound like items on a very intense shopping list, but they represent a vast chemical toolkit. Some of these compounds are familiar because humans have borrowed them for flavour, medicine, stimulation, or discomfort. Caffeine, found in coffee and tea plants, can affect insects as well as sleepy humans attempting to become functional. Nicotine, produced by tobacco plants, is a powerful alkaloid that helps deter herbivores. Capsaicin gives chili peppers their heat and can discourage mammals from eating the fruit, while birds are much less affected and can spread the seeds. Mustard oils produced from glucosinolates in plants such as mustard, cabbage, and horseradish create sharp flavours that can also discourage attackers. This is one of the strange little truths of plant chemistry. Many flavours humans enjoy in tiny culinary amounts began as plant defences. Mint, pepper, mustard, chili, garlic, and many bitter compounds are not there because plants wanted dinner to be more interesting. They are part of ecological conversations involving insects, microbes, mammals, birds, and competing plants. Human cooking wandered into the middle of this chemical battlefield and decided some of it would go nicely with potatoes. Plants can also change their defences after being attacked. These are called induced defences. Instead of keeping every possible defence fully active all the time, which would cost energy and resources, a plant may increase certain defensive chemicals after damage occurs. When an insect chews a leaf, the plant can detect wound signals and compounds from the insect's saliva. This may trigger local responses at the damaged site and wider responses elsewhere in the plant. The untouched leaves may become less nutritious, more bitter, tougher, or chemically less welcoming. Two important signalling molecules in plant defense are jasmonic acid and salicylic acid. Jasmonic acid is strongly associated with responses to herbivores and tissue damage. It helps organize the production of defensive compounds against chewing insects and other attackers. Salicylic acid is especially important in defense against pathogens such as certain bacteria, fungi and viruses. It plays a role in systemic acquired resistance, a broad defensive state that can make other parts of the plant better prepared after an initial infection. Plants do not have immune systems like animals, but they do have intricate defense signaling pathways. Some plant defenses are indirect. A damaged plant can release volatile organic compounds into the air. These airborne chemicals may warn neighbouring tissues, influence nearby plants, or attract other organisms. In some cases, they attract predators or parasitoids of the herbivores feeding on the plant. For example, when caterpillars chew certain leaves, the plant may release chemicals that help parasitic wasps locate the caterpillars. The wasps arrive, the caterpillars have a very bad afternoon, and the plant benefits without ever moving from its spot. Plants also form defensive alliances. Ants may protect certain plants in exchange for nectar or shelter. Fungi and bacteria around roots can help defend against pathogens. Some plant communities are shaped partly by chemical competition, where compounds released from leaves, roots, or decaying plant matter affect the growth of neighbours. This process is called allelopathy. Black walnut trees are often discussed in this context because they produce juglone, a compound that can inhibit the growth of some nearby plants. All of this reveals a quieter side of the hidden life of plants. A peaceful-looking leaf may be toughened with fibres, coated with wax, armed with bitter compounds, monitored by signalling pathways, and ready to call in tiny airborne reinforcements. A stem may be protected by bark, thorns, toxins, or partnerships. A root may be releasing chemicals into the soil, shaping the microbial world around it. Plant defense is not usually fast or dramatic in the animal sense. There is no chase, no roar, no heroic leap across the forest floor. But there is detection, response, escalation, and strategy shaped by evolution. The plant stands still because it must. Beneath that stillness, it is alert, chemically inventive, and quietly involved in conflicts too small, too slow, or too hidden for human eyes to notice. Some plants look so gentle that it feels almost rude to accuse them of hunting. A sundew sparkling in a bog can seem delicate, almost jewel-like. A pitcher plant can look like an elegant little vase. A Venus flytrap can look slightly more suspicious, admittedly, but still very small, very green, and very unlikely to chase anyone down a hallway. Yet these plants reveal one of the strangest truths about the plant world. Even organisms rooted in place can become traps, lures, and quiet biological ambushes. Carnivorous plants are still plants in the ordinary sense. They photosynthesize. They use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to make sugars, and they remain rooted in the ground or anchored in wet habitats. They are not eating insects for energy in the same way animals eat food. The sugars that power their bodies still mostly come from photosynthesis. What they gain from trapped animals is extra nutrition, especially nitrogen and phosphorus. Those nutrients are needed for proteins, genetic material, membranes, and growth, but in some habitats they are difficult to obtain from the soil. This is why carnivory has evolved mainly in places such as bogs, wetlands, acidic soils, and nutrient-poor sands. These environments may have plenty of water and sunlight, but very little usable nitrogen or phosphorus. A plant living there can catch light perfectly well, while still being starved of the minerals needed to build new tissues. Under those conditions, an insect becomes less like a meal and more like a tiny packet of fertilizer with legs. Unfortunate for the insect, certainly, but very useful for the plant. The Venus fly trap is the most famous example, partly because it moves quickly enough to feel almost animal-like. Its trap is a modified leaf with sensitive trigger hairs on the inner surface. When an insect touches a trigger hair, the plant does not close immediately from just one touch. Usually, repeated stimulation is needed within a short period. This helps prevent the trap from wasting energy on raindrops, falling debris, or other disappointing non-prey events. When the signals are strong enough, electrical changes and rapid shifts in cell pressure help the trap snap shut. Once closed, the trap may tighten if the prey continues to move. Digestive glands release enzymes that break down soft tissues, allowing the plant to absorb nutrients. The Venus flytrap grows naturally in a small region of the coastal Carolinas in the United States, especially in wet, open, fire-influenced habitats. Its fame makes it seem almost common, but in the wild it is a specialized plant with a limited range and a very particular ecological home. Pitcher plants use a different strategy. Their leaves form deep tubes or cups that act as pitfall traps. The rim may be slippery, colourful, scented, or nectar-producing, encouraging insects to approach. Once inside, prey may fall into fluid at the bottom, where escape becomes difficult. Some pitchers contain digestive enzymes, while others rely partly on microbial communities living in the fluid to help break down captured animals. A pitcher plant is not lunging at anything. It simply invites visitors to the wrong place and lets gravity do the rude part. Sundews are more delicate but no less effective. Their leaves are covered with sticky glandular hairs that glisten like drops of dew. Insects attracted to the shining droplets become stuck, and the leaf may slowly curl around the prey. The sticky fluid contains enzymes and other compounds that help digest the insect. Charles Darwin studied sundews carefully and wrote about them in his book Insectivorous Plants, published in 1875. He tested how sundews responded to different substances, showing how precise and sensitive their reactions could be. Bladderworts take speed in another direction. These aquatic or wet soil plants have tiny bladder-like traps that create suction. Small aquatic animals trigger hairs near the trap door, the door opens, and water rushes in, carrying the prey with it. The trap then resets. Butterworts, meanwhile, use sticky leaves that trap small insects on their surfaces. Their leaves can produce digestive enzymes and may curl slightly to improve contact. Across carnivorous plants, ordinary plant organs have been reshaped into pits, glue pads, suction chambers, snap traps, and slow green snares. Not all unusual plant strategies involve trapping animals for nutrients. Some plants cheat in a different way by taking resources directly from other plants. Parasitic plants use specialized structures called haustoria to connect with host tissues and draw out water, minerals, or sugars. Dodder is a striking example. It begins life from a seed, but once it finds a suitable host, it wraps around the stem and inserts haustoria, often losing much of its own photosynthetic ability. It looks like a tangle of pale orange or yellow thread, which is not a comforting look if you happen to be the host plant. Rafflesia is another remarkable parasitic plant. It lives mostly hidden inside its host vine, drawing resources through specialized tissues, and only becomes obvious when it produces its enormous flower. Some Rafflesia flowers smell strongly of rotting flesh, attracting flies that may help with pollination. It is a plant that has reduced much of the ordinary plant body and invested heavily in one astonishing, unpleasantly scented reproductive display. Evolution does not always choose elegance. Sometimes it chooses dramatic smell. These plants show how flexible plant life can be. Leaves can become traps. Roots and stems can become invasive feeding structures. Flowers can become lures. Sticky hairs, slippery rims, suction bladders, trigger hairs, digestive enzymes, and Hostoria all come from the same broad principle. A rooted organism must solve problems without walking away. When soil is poor, some plants supplement their diet. When sunlight is limited or another plant has already done the work, some parasites steal. The hidden life of plants is not always gentle. Sometimes it is patient, sometimes cooperative, and sometimes quietly predatory. A bog may look peaceful, but among the moss and water, leaves are waiting, pitchers are open, and tiny traps are set. The plant world does not need footsteps to be active. It can hunt, deceive, digest and steal while remaining perfectly still. A forest can seem like a place made mostly of trees. Trunks rise, branches spread, leaves filter the light, and the air feels cooler, damper, and quieter than the world outside. But a forest is not simply a crowd of trees standing politely together. It is a layered living system, made from plants, fungi, microbes, animals, soil, water, light, climate, dead wood, and time. Every forest is a kind of slow conversation between life and place. The most obvious layer is the canopy, where the crowns of trees capture much of the sunlight. In tropical rainforests, this canopy can be dense enough to turn the forest floor into a green twilight. Beneath it may be an understory of smaller trees and young saplings, waiting for gaps in the light. Lower still are shrubs, herbs, mosses, seedlings, fallen leaves, fungi, and roots. The forest floor is not a tidy carpet. It is a working surface where death becomes soil, nutrients are recycled, and small lives go about their business with admirable disregard for human neatness. Below the surface are soil horizons, layers shaped by minerals, organic matter, water movement, roots, microbes, and decay. Fine roots branch through these layers, absorbing water and nutrients. Fungal threads spread between particles. Bacteria break down organic material. Earthworms, insects, mites, and countless other small organisms alter the structure of the soil. Dead wood, which may look like failure to the impatient eye, becomes habitat, food, moisture storage, and a slow source of nutrients. In a forest, even a fallen tree is not finished. It has simply changed jobs. Competition is one of the forces that shapes this system. Trees compete for light by growing upward, spreading leaves, and casting shade. In dense forests, the difference between reaching sunlight and remaining in deep shade can decide whether a young tree survives. But height is expensive. A tree must invest in trunk, branches, roots, and transport tissues before it can hold its leaves high in the air. It must decide, through growth rather than thought, how much energy goes into wood, leaves, roots, flowers, seeds, and chemical defense. Water and nutrients create other contests. Roots spread through soil, often branching more heavily where resources are available. Some trees grow deep roots, others shallow networks, and many rely on mycorrhizal fungi to help gather nutrients from tiny soil spaces. In dry periods, competition for water can become intense. In nutrient-poor soils, recycling becomes especially important because the forest cannot afford to let useful elements drift away casually, like someone leaving the heating on with the windows open. Forests also change over time through succession. Succession is the process by which plant communities shift after disturbance or as conditions develop. After a fire, flood, landslide, abandoned field or storm, different plants arrive, grow, alter the environment, and make room for others. Frederick Clements, an important early ecologist, describes succession as a relatively orderly development toward a mature community. Henry Gleason offered a different view, emphasizing individual species responses and chance. Modern ecology recognizes that both pattern and unpredictability matter. Forests can follow broad tendencies, but they are also shaped by history, climate, soils, disturbance, and random arrival. Disturbance is not always destruction in the simple sense. Fire can clear old material, release nutrients, open seed cones, and create conditions needed by certain species. Storms can tear gaps in the canopy, allowing light to reach seedlings below. Floods can bring sediment and reshape river forests. Insect outbreaks, disease, grazing, drought, and human activity can all change which plants survive. Disturbance ecology studies these forces, showing that forests are dynamic rather than frozen. A forest is not a museum display of trees. It is more like a long-running drama performed very slowly, with occasional weather-related interruptions. Different forests solve the problems of life in different ways. The Amazon rainforest is warm, wet, and intensely diverse, with countless plant strategies packed into layered vegetation. Boreal forests, stretching across northern regions, are dominated by cold-tolerant trees such as spruces, pines, firs, and larches, often growing in short seasons and acidic soils. Temperate rainforests, such as those found in parts of the Pacific Northwest, can hold enormous trees, thick mosses, and high moisture. Mangrove forests live at the edge of land and sea, where salt, tides, and low-oxygen mud require specialized roots and salt management. Cloud forests form in misty mountain regions, where plants capture moisture from fog, and branches often carry orchids, mosses, ferns, and bromeliads. Forests also store carbon. Through photosynthesis, trees and other plants draw carbon dioxide from the air and build carbon into leaves, trunks, branches, roots, and fruits. Some of that carbon returns quickly through respiration, decay, fire, or feeding. Some remains stored for years, decades, or centuries in wood, roots, leaf litter, dead wood, and soil organic matter. Forest soils can hold large amounts of carbon, especially where cool, wet, or low oxygen conditions slow decomposition. This is one reason forests matter so deeply in the carbon cycle, although they are not a simple cure for climate change. They are living systems with limits, vulnerabilities, and their own ecological needs. A forest also controls its own small climate. Shade cools the ground. Leaves release water vapor through transpiration. Moisture is held in moss, soil, wood, and leaf litter. Wind is slowed. Temperature swings are softened. Within a forest, the world can feel gentler, not because the forest is trying to be kind, but because its structure changes light, air, water, and heat. This is the hidden life of plants at a larger scale. A forest is not just many trees. It is habitat, plumbing, architecture, competition, cooperation, shelter, memory, and stored sunlight. It cycles. Nutrients, feeds fungi, houses animals, moderates climate, and turns fallen life into future growth. From the canopy to the deepest roots, the forest is a living system, standing still only from far away. Plants do not just live beneath the atmosphere. They help make the atmosphere what it is. Every leaf is part of a quiet exchange with the air. During photosynthesis, plants take in carbon dioxide and use light energy to build sugars, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. During respiration, plants also use oxygen and release carbon dioxide, just as animals and fungi do. When leaves, roots, branches, and whole plants die and decay, carbon dioxide can return to the air again through the work of microbes. So the relationship is not a simple one-way gift. It is a continuous exchange, with carbon moving in and out of living systems, soils, oceans, rocks, and the atmosphere. This wider movement is called the carbon cycle. Carbon can exist in the air as carbon dioxide. It can be built into plant tissues through photosynthesis, then passed to animals that eat plants, fungi that decompose them, or soils that store their remains. Some carbon moves into oceans where it dissolves, enters marine organisms, or becomes part of long-term chemical and geological processes. Some is locked away in rocks. Some ancient organic carbon, buried and transformed over millions of years, became coal, oil, and natural gas. When fossil fuels are burned, carbon that had been stored underground is returned to the atmosphere very quickly by geological standards. The planet does not appreciate rushed paperwork. The connection between plants and air was uncovered gradually. Joseph Priestley, working in the 18th century, showed that plants could help restore air that had been altered by burning candles, or breathing animals, though the chemistry was not yet fully understood in modern terms. Janningenhaus later showed that green plants release oxygen in light, making sunlight central to the story. These discoveries helped reveal that plants were not passive objects growing from soil, but active participants in the chemistry of the atmosphere. Plants also influence air through water. When water evaporates from leaves through tiny pores called stomata, the process is known as transpiration. When evaporation from land, soil, and plant surfaces is considered together, it is called evapotranspiration. This movement of water vapor can cool leaves and landscapes, raise humidity, and influence local temperature. A tree shading a street is not only blocking sunlight, it is also moving water from soil to air, helping soften heat in the surrounding environment. Across large areas, these effects can become regional. Forests can influence rainfall patterns by recycling moisture. In the Amazon basin, huge amounts of water are drawn up by roots and released into the atmosphere by leaves, helping maintain humid air and contributing to rainfall downwind. Vegetation cover can cool land surfaces compared with bare ground, especially where plants have enough water to transpire. This does not mean forests create weather with perfect control, like leafy weather machines with excellent manners. It means plant life is woven into the movement of heat, moisture, and air. The oxygen story is even deeper. Today's atmosphere contains abundant oxygen because of a very long history of photosynthetic life, beginning with ancient cyanobacteria long before land plants existed. Plants, algae, and cyanobacteria continue to produce oxygen through photosynthesis, but the long-term amount of oxygen in the atmosphere depends on more than daily photosynthesis alone. Oxygen accumulates over geological time when some organic carbon is buried, instead of being immediately consumed by respiration and decay. Ocean chemistry, rock weathering, burial of organic matter, and the balance between oxygen production and oxygen consumption all matter. The air we breathe is the result of living processes and geological processes working together across immense spans of time. Plants are also central to climate change, though they are not a simple cure for it. Through photosynthesis, plants draw carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store carbon in leaves, stems, trunks, roots, and soils. Forests, grasslands, wetlands, peatlands, mangroves, and agricultural lands all hold carbon in different ways. Peatlands are especially important because waterlogged conditions slow decomposition, allowing partly decayed plant material to accumulate over thousands of years. When peatlands are drained, burned, or damaged, stored carbon can be released. Forest loss matters because cutting or burning forests can release carbon and reduce future carbon uptake. Reforestation means restoring forests where they have recently been lost. Afforestation means establishing forests where they have not recently existed. Both can help store carbon when done well, but they must be approached carefully. A plantation of one fast-growing species is not the same as a diverse natural forest. Planting trees in the wrong place can harm grasslands, water supplies, or local ecosystems. Plants can help, but they cannot quietly absorb unlimited emissions while human activity carries on as normal, which would be a very convenient arrangement, but not a real one. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change describes land, forests, agriculture, and ecosystems as important parts of climate mitigation and adaptation, while also emphasizing limits, risks, and trade-offs. The Food and Agriculture Organization studies forests, soils, farming, land use, and food systems, showing how deeply plant life is tied to both climate and human survival. Crops feed people. Forests store carbon and shelter biodiversity. Soils hold nutrients and organic matter. Wetlands buffer water and preserve carbon-rich plant remains. These systems are useful not because they are tidy, but because they are alive. The hidden life of plants therefore reaches into every breath and every cloud-shadowed landscape. Plants take carbon from air, return oxygen, move water, cool surfaces, build soils, feed organisms, and store sunlight in living form. They do not control the atmosphere alone, but the atmosphere would not be familiar without them. The green world is not just growing under the sky. Quietly, patiently, and imperfectly, it is helping shape the sky itself. Human civilization often looks like a story of cities, tools, writing, trade, machines, and ideas. But underneath all of that is a quieter story made of roots, seeds, fibers, wood, starch, sugar, oils, medicines, and leaves. Human history has never floated above the plant world. It has grown from it. Plants have fed human bodies, clothed them, sheltered them, warmed them, healed them, poisoned them, flavoured their meals, stabilised their soils, shaped their landscapes, and supplied the oxygen every civilization has breathed while deciding it was in charge. Food is the most obvious dependence. Almost every human diet rests directly or indirectly on plants. Grains, pulses, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, oils, herbs, spices, and sugars all come from plant bodies. Even meat, milk, and eggs usually depend on plants first, because animals eat grasses, grains, leaves, or plant-based feed. Plants are also sources of fibre, including cotton, flax, hemp, and jute. Wood has been used for houses, ships, tools, furniture, fuel, paper, and countless everyday objects. Plant roots hold soil in place, forests shape watersheds, and vegetation supports pollinators, microbes, fungi, and animals that keep ecosystems functioning. These benefits are often called ecosystem services, which is a very formal way of saying that the green world quietly does a lot of unpaid work. A major turning point came during the Neolithic period, when human groups in different parts of the world began domesticating plants. Domestication did not happen once, in one place, with one tidy plan. It occurred over many generations as people gathered, planted, protected, selected, stored, and replanted useful species. Wheat and barley became central in parts of Southwest Asia. Rice was domesticated in Asia. Maize arose from wild grasses in Mesoamerica. Potatoes became deeply important in the Andes. Beans, peas, lentils, millet, and sorghum were also domesticated in different regions, each tied to particular climates, soils, cultures, and ways of life. The Russian botanist Nikolai Vavilov helped reveal how crop origins are connected to geography and genetic diversity. He studied the centres of diversity of cultivated plants, showing that regions where crops have many wild relatives and varied traditional forms can reveal where domestication and long cultivation were especially important. His work linked food to landscape, history, and evolution. A crop is not simply a thing in a field. It is a record of human choice and plant variation across time. Artificial selection changed crops profoundly. Humans saved seeds from plants with useful traits, even before they understood genes. Over generations, this altered seed size, fruit sweetness, bitterness, growth habit, harvest reliability, and the tendency of seeds to remain attached instead of scattering naturally. In wild grasses, shattering helps seeds disperse. In crops such as wheat and barley, reduced shattering helps humans harvest grain before it falls to the ground. From the plant's original perspective, this is a little inconvenient. From a farmer's perspective, it is breakfast. A small number of staple crops now provide a large share of human calories. Rice, wheat, maize, and potatoes are among the most important. Their success comes from high productivity, storability, adaptability, and the ability to be turned into many different foods. Rice feeds billions across Asia and beyond. Wheat becomes bread, noodles, pasta, and countless baked foods. Maize is eaten directly, fed to livestock, processed into oils and starches, and used in many food systems. Potatoes store energy underground as tubers and can produce substantial food from relatively small areas of land. These plants are not just ingredients. They are foundations of settlement, population growth, trade, and culture. In the 20th century, Norman Borlaug became closely associated with the Green Revolution, especially through high-yield wheat varieties. Alongside fertilizers, irrigation, pesticides, mechanization, and expanded agricultural research, these crops helped increase food production in several regions. The benefits were enormous in terms of harvest and hunger reduction, but the costs and trade-offs were real as well. Intensive agriculture can increase pressure on water supplies, soils, biodiversity, and local farming systems. Plant science helped feed more people, but it also revealed that food production is never separate from ecology. Everyday meals contain hidden plant structures. A grain of rice or wheat is a seed. A pea or bean is also a seed. A potato is a tuber, a swollen underground stem built for storage. An onion is made from modified leaves and a short stem. A carrot is a storage root. An apple is linked to flower tissue and seed protection. A tomato is a fruit because it develops from the flower's ovary and contains seeds, no matter how strongly it may feel like it belongs near basil and mozzarella. Human food is botany disguised as dinner. Much of human civilization has therefore been shaped by plant bodies, plant chemistry, plant genetics, and plant reproduction. Fields encouraged settlement, stored grain supported cities, fibers clothed workers, sailors, kings, and babies. Timber built roofs and ships. Spices moved through trade routes. Medicines came from leaves, bark, roots, and seeds. Crops carried culture from one generation to the next. The hidden life of plants is not hidden because it is distant from human life. It is hidden because it is too close to notice. It is in bread, tea, cotton, paper, timber, fruit bowls, gardens, hedgerows, medicines, farms, and the soil beneath every harvest. Human civilization did not rise apart from plants. It rose by learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to live with them, change them, depend on them, and be changed by them in return. A plant may look quiet, but chemically it is rarely simple. Inside leaves, bark, roots, seeds, flowers, and fruit, plants produce thousands of compounds that can affect insects, fungi, bacteria, grazing animals, and humans. Some of these chemicals taste bitter. Some smell sweet. Some heal, some irritate, some poison, and some make dinner far more interesting than it would otherwise be. A sprig of rosemary, a vanilla pod, a coffee bean, and a deadly seed all belong to the same broad truth. Plants are living chemical laboratories. Most plant chemicals did not evolve for human use. They evolved because plants needed to survive. A plant rooted in place has to solve problems with growth, structure, timing, and chemistry. It may need to deter insects, fight infection, attract pollinators, signal danger, shade competitors, tolerate heat, resist ultraviolet light, or cope with drought. Chemical compounds help plants do all of this. To humans, one compound may be a medicine, another a spice, and another a toxin. To the plant, they are usually tools for staying alive. Many of these substances are known as secondary metabolites. They are not secondary because they are unimportant, but because they are not part of the most basic processes of growth and energy use in the same way that sugars, proteins, and genetic material are. Alkaloids, terpenes, phenolics, tannins, and glycosides are all broad groups of plant chemicals, and each group contains an enormous variety of compounds. Some are stored in leaves, some are concentrated in bark or roots, some appear in flowers or fruit, others are released into the air as scent or into the soil around roots. The connection between plant chemistry and medicine is ancient. Long before modern pharmacology, people experimented carefully and sometimes dangerously with leaves, bark, roots, resins, and seeds. Willow bark contains salicylates, compounds related to the chemistry that eventually led to aspirin. Cinchona bark contains quinine, historically important in treating malaria. The opium poppy produces morphine, a powerful pain-relieving compound that also carries serious risks. The Pacific yew contains paclitaxel, a compound developed into an important cancer medicine. These examples show how plant chemistry can become part of human medicine, but only through careful study, dosing, preparation, and clinical testing. The World Health Organization recognizes that many people around the world use traditional medicine, including plant-based remedies, and that plant-derived compounds have played important roles in drug discovery. But this does not mean that every natural substance is safe, effective, or suitable for self-treatment. Nature is not automatically gentle. A forest is not a pharmacy with better lighting. Plant compounds can be useful, harmful, inactive, or unpredictable depending on the species, dose, preparation, health context, and exact chemistry involved. That same plant world also contains serious poisons. Ricin, found in castor beans, is a highly toxic protein. Cyanogenic glycosides occur in some seeds and leaves, where they can release cyanide under certain conditions. Deadly nightshade contains tropane alkaloids that can dangerously affect the nervous system. Foxglove contains cardiac glycosides that influenced heart medicine, but can also be poisonous. These plants are not evil, of course. They are not lurking in hedgerows with tiny villainous plans. Their chemistry evolved in ecological contexts, especially defense against being eaten, infected, or damaged. Dose is one of the most important ideas in understanding plant chemistry. A substance can be harmless at one level, useful at another, and dangerous at a higher one. Context matters too. A compound may be safe in a cooked food but unsafe when concentrated. A plant part may be edible, while another part is toxic. Preparation can change chemistry, reducing some risks or sometimes creating new ones. This is why plant knowledge has always required caution. The difference between flavour, medicine and poison is often not a neat boundary, but a matter of chemistry and amount. Flavour and scent are part of this story as well. Mint produces menthol, which creates a cooling sensation. Vanilla pods contain vanillin, one of the world's most familiar flavour compounds. Cinnamon bark contains cinnamaldehyde. Basil, rosemary, thyme, citrus peel, lavender, and many other plants produce aromatic oils rich in terpenes and related compounds. These scents may attract pollinators, repel herbivores, inhibit microbes, or protect tissues from stress. Humans discovered that some of these defensive and signaling chemicals made food, perfume, and medicine more appealing. In other words, cuisine is partly humans politely borrowing plant survival chemistry and sprinkling it on soup. Flowers use scent to call pollinators. Fruits use colour, sugar, acidity, and aroma to attract animals that disperse seeds. Leaves may use bitter compounds to discourage grazing. Roots may release chemicals that influence fungi, bacteria, or neighbouring plants. Plant chemistry is not random decoration. It is communication, defense, attraction, competition, and adaptation written in molecules. This makes the stillness of plants even more deceptive. A quiet leaf may contain bitter tannins, fragrant oils, defensive alkaloids, antimicrobial phenolics, and signals ready to change after injury. A seed may hold both stored food and protective toxins. A flower may smell sweet to one animal and invisible to another. A piece of bark may contain compounds powerful enough to alter human history. The hidden life of plants is, therefore, not only in roots, light, and growth. It is also in chemistry. Beneath the green surface, plants are making, storing, releasing, and transforming substances with astonishing precision. They do not need to move quickly to influence the world. Sometimes all a plant needs is a molecule. Plants live with stress in a way that is almost easy to miss, because they usually endure it without dramatic movement. A dry field does not run toward rain. A tree in winter does not complain, although some bare branches do have the look of someone quietly questioning their life choices. A seedling surrounded by competitors cannot simply move to a sunnier patch. Instead, plants respond through growth, chemistry, structure, timing, and repair. Their survival depends on reading trouble early and adjusting before the damage becomes too much. Plant stress can come from almost every direction. Drought can pull water from tissues, flooding can suffocate roots, heat can damage proteins and membranes, cold can freeze water inside or around cells, salt can interfere with water uptake and ion balance, nutrient shortage can slow growth, herbivores chew leaves and stems, pathogens invade tissues, neighbouring plants compete for light, water, and minerals. Fire can destroy whole shoots while sometimes creating conditions for regrowth. And now, changing climate is altering temperature patterns, rainfall, drought risk, wildfire behaviour, pest pressure, and flowering times across many regions. Drought is one of the most important stresses for land plants. When water becomes scarce, plants often close their stomata, the tiny pores on leaves that allow carbon dioxide to enter. Closing stomata reduces water loss, but it also limits photosynthesis. This is one of the constant compromises of plant life. To make sugars, a leaf must open itself to the air, but open air can steal water away. The hormone abscisic acid helps coordinate drought responses, especially stomatal closure. It acts like a chemical warning that conditions are becoming too dry for casual openness. Plants may also shift root growth during drought, sending roots deeper or spreading them through patches of soil where water remains. Some produce waxier leaves, smaller leaves, or hairs that reduce water loss. Others drop leaves entirely, sacrificing photosynthetic surface to protect the rest of the body. Some plants use osmotic adjustment, building up dissolved compounds inside cells so they can hold onto water more effectively. This is not glamorous perhaps, but it is very practical. Survival often depends less on looking lush and more on not becoming a crisp. Flooding creates the opposite problem. Too much water around roots can reduce oxygen in the soil because water fills the air spaces roots normally need. Without enough oxygen, root respiration becomes difficult and tissues can be damaged. Wetland plants have evolved ways around this. Some develop erynchyma, spongy tissue with internal air spaces that help move oxygen through the plant. Rice can tolerate flooded soils better than many crops, partly because of such adaptations. Mangroves face both flooding and salt, growing in tidal mud with specialised roots that help them deal with low oxygen and unstable ground. Heat stress can damage proteins, disrupt membranes, and interfere with photosynthesis. Plants respond by producing heat shock proteins, adjusting membrane composition, changing leaf angle, increasing transpiration when water is available, or slowing growth. Cold stress brings different dangers. Freezing can form ice outside cells and draw water away, while severe freezing can damage membranes directly. Some plants produce protective sugars, proteins, and anti-freeze-like compounds that help tissues tolerate cold. Temperate trees also use dormancy, slowing growth and protecting buds through winter, rather than trying to behave as if January is simply a misunderstood spring. Salt is another challenge, especially in coastal habitats, deserts, and irrigated soils where salts can accumulate. Halophytes are salt-tolerant plants. Some manage salt by storing it in older leaves, moving it into vacuoles, or excreting it through salt glands. Others have succulent tissues that dilute internal salt levels with stored water. Ion management is crucial because too much sodium can disrupt cellular processes. Salt-tolerant plants are not ignoring the problem. They are constantly sorting, storing, excluding, or expelling ions with quiet biochemical effort. Plants also defend themselves against disease. Their first protection is physical: cell walls, bark, waxy cuticles, and tough outer tissues, but they also have immune receptors that detect molecules associated with pathogens or damaged plant cells. Local defense responses can strengthen cell walls, produce antimicrobial compounds, and trigger controlled cell death around infection sites to limit spread. Salicylic acid helps coordinate defense against many pathogens and is involved in systemic acquired resistance, a state that prepares other parts of the plant to respond more strongly after an initial attack. Changing climate adds pressure because it shifts the background conditions plants evolve to expect. Warmer springs can alter flowering time, longer droughts can weaken forests, mild winters may allow some pests and diseases to survive more easily. Species ranges can move uphill or toward cooler regions, but plants cannot always migrate quickly enough, especially when habitats are fragmented. Wildfire patterns may intensify in some regions where heat, drought, vegetation, and land management combine dangerously. Conservation scientists at places such as Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and National Botanical Gardens study these pressures through fieldwork, seed banks, plant collections, and habitat research. Stress reveals how active plant life really is. A plant under pressure is not merely suffering in silence. It is closing pores, redirecting roots, changing hormones, repairing proteins, thickening tissues, releasing chemicals, resisting infection, entering dormancy, or waiting for better conditions. Its stillness hides a constant negotiation with the world around it. To be rooted is to be exposed. To survive as a plant is to meet that exposure with patience, chemistry, and astonishing resilience. The future of plant science is not only happening in greenhouses and fields, though those still matter very much. It is also happening through microscopes, satellites, gene sequencing, seed banks, climate models, field stations, botanical gardens, crop trials, and forests watched from orbit. Modern plant science brings together genetics, ecology, physiology, conservation, agriculture, soil science, remote sensing, and climate research. It studies plants as cells, as crops, as wild species, as ecosystems, and as part of the planetary systems that keep human life possible. One of the great shifts has come from plant genomics, the study of plant genes and genomes. A genome is the full set of genetic instructions inside an organism. By reading plant genomes, scientists can investigate how plants develop roots, leaves, flowers, seeds, chemical defenses, drought responses, disease resistance, and seasonal timing. This does not make plants simple. If anything, genetics has revealed how deeply layered plant life is. A small plant on a laboratory bench can contain a whole library of instructions, switches, feedback systems, and evolutionary history. One especially important model organism is Arabidopsis thaliana. It is a small flowering plant in the mustard family, and at first glance it does not look like a superstar. It looks more like something someone forgot to weed. But for plant biologists, Arabidopsis thaliana has been enormously useful. It grows quickly, produces many seeds, has a relatively small genome, and is easy to study in the laboratory. Research on Arabidopsis thaliana has helped scientists understand flowering time, root development, hormone signaling, stress responses, and how genes control plant form. Crop improvement is another major part of future plant science, though it has very old roots. For thousands of years, people improved crops through conventional breeding, selecting plants with useful traits and saving their seeds. Modern breeding still uses selection, but with more precise tools. Marker-assisted selection helps breeders track useful genetic regions. Genome sequencing allows researchers to compare varieties and identify genes linked with yield, nutrition, disease resistance, drought tolerance, or heat tolerance. Gene editing adds another tool, including CRISPR, a technology associated with Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, whose work helped transform modern molecular biology. The aim is not simply to make plants bigger for the sake of it. Researchers are trying to improve photosynthesis, drought tolerance, nutrient efficiency, disease resistance, salt tolerance, and crop resilience under changing environmental conditions. If a crop can use water more efficiently, resist a fungal disease, tolerate hotter nights, or grow with less fertilizer, that can matter greatly for farmers and food security. But each improvement has to be judged carefully. A useful trait in one region may not work the same way in another. Plants live inside real soils, real climates, real economies, and real farming traditions. Biology rarely fits neatly into a spreadsheet, no matter how politely the spreadsheet asks. Plant science now also looks down from space. Remote sensing uses satellites, aircraft, drones, and instruments that detect reflected light, heat, and other signals from the land surface. These tools can monitor forest cover, crop health, drought stress, vegetation greenness, wildfire damage, deforestation, and seasonal changes across huge areas. A single researcher could never walk every forest edge or field on Earth unless they had several lifetimes and extremely comfortable boots. Satellites make it possible to see patterns that would otherwise remain invisible. This matters because plants are responding to a changing world. Growing seasons are shifting in many regions. Some species are moving their ranges toward cooler areas where they can. Droughts, heat waves, pests, disease pressures, and fires are altering ecosystems and agriculture. Remote sensing can show where forests are being lost, where crops are under stress, and where vegetation is recovering. Combined with ground observations, it gives scientists a clearer picture of how the green world is changing. Conservation science is just as important as crop science. Seed banking preserves genetic diversity for future research, restoration, and food security. Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, through the Millennium Seed Bank, works to conserve seeds from wild plant species around the world. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault stores backup seed collections for agriculture. The International Union for Conservation of Nature assesses extinction risk and helps show which species and habitats are most threatened. National botanical gardens, herbaria, and field research stations also protect knowledge as well as living plants. Wild relatives of crop plants are especially valuable. They may carry traits that domesticated crops have lost, such as resistance to disease, tolerance of drought, or adaptation to poor soils. Preserving them is not only about saving rare plants for their own sake, though that matters. It is also about keeping options open for future food systems. A plant growing quietly on a hillside may contain genetic possibilities that become vital decades from now. Organisations such as the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Centre and the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research support crop research across regions where food security is closely tied to climate, poverty, land use, and plant health. Their work shows that plant science is not just laboratory curiosity. It is connected to hunger, livelihoods, biodiversity, water, and the stability of landscapes. The future of plant science is therefore broader than the question of how to grow more food. It asks how plants sense, adapt, cooperate, compete, store carbon, shape climates, feed societies, and survive stress. It asks how to protect forests, restore damaged habitats, preserve seeds, improve crops, and understand the green systems that quietly hold much of life together. The hidden life of plants is still being uncovered. One gene, one root, one leaf, one satellite image, and one living landscape at a time. The hidden life of plants is not hidden because plants are magical. It is hidden because so much of what they do happens on scales that human senses are not naturally built to notice. Their movements may unfold over hours, days, or years. Their messages may pass as hormones, electrical changes, airborne chemicals, or signals through living tissues. Their most important work may happen inside chloroplasts, beneath soil, inside seeds, along fungal threads, or within a ring of wood laid down quietly during a single growing season. Plants are strange not because they break the rules of life, but because they reveal another version of those rules, A plant builds itself from light, water, air, minerals, and genetic instructions. That sentence should feel much stranger than it usually does. A tree trunk, a blade of grass, a potato, a rose petal, and a grain of wheat all begin with matter gathered from the world around them. Carbon dioxide enters through stomata. Water rises from roots. Minerals move through soil films and fungal partnerships. Sunlight powers photosynthesis. Genes guide the construction of cells, tissues, pigments, enzymes, hormones, roots, leaves, flowers, and seeds. A plant is not just growing in its environment, it is steadily making itself from the environment. This is why plants can seem so familiar and so alien at the same time. They do not have brains, nerves, eyes, ears, muscles, or a heart. They do not think in the human sense, and they do not need to be described as conscious to be remarkable. Scientific wonder does not require exaggeration. A plant can be astonishing without being secretly human. Its complexity belongs to plant life itself, rooted, modular, chemical, responsive, patient, and deeply connected to the conditions around it. Photosynthesis alone is enough to make plants extraordinary. Inside chloroplasts, light energy is used to build sugars from carbon dioxide and water. Oxygen is released. Carbon becomes living structure. Solar energy becomes chemical energy. That process supports most food webs on Earth, from forests and grasslands to crops and ocean plankton blooms. A quiet leaf in sunlight is handling energy from a star with such calm efficiency that it barely seems polite to interrupt. Below ground, the strangeness continues. Roots do not merely hold a plant in place. They sense gravity, water, oxygen, nutrients, and obstacles. Root hairs increase contact with soil. Mycorrhizal fungi form partnerships that can help plants acquire phosphorus, nitrogen, and water in exchange for sugars. Microbes gather around roots in the rhizosphere, where chemistry, competition, cooperation, and decay shape the living soil. A plant seen from above may look like a single individual. Beneath the surface, it is part of a wider underground system. Plants move, but not by walking. Shoots bend toward light through phototropism. Roots respond to gravity through gravitropism, and to moisture through hydrotropism. Tendrils coil after touch. Flowers open and close. Mimosa pudica folds its leaves when disturbed. The Venus flytrap snaps shut when trigger hairs are touched in the right pattern. Time-lapse photography reveals that plants are not motionless at all. They are simply moving in a slower language. They also signal. Auxin, gibberellins, cytokinins, abscisic acid, ethylene, jasminates, and salicylic acid help coordinate growth, stress responses, ripening, defense, and disease resistance. Phytochromes, cryptochromes, and phototropins allow plants to detect light quality, shade, direction, day length, and daily timing. Their body clocks help them anticipate dawn, regulate stomata, time flowering, enter dormancy, and prepare for seasonal change. They do not merely react to the present. They prepare for patterns that tend to return. Flowers and seeds reveal another layer of hidden life. A flower is not just a beautiful object. It is a reproductive structure shaped by pollen movement, ovules, pollinators, wind, scent, colour, and timing. Fruit protects and disperses seeds. A seed can wait in apparent stillness, holding an embryo, stored food, and a protective coat until water, oxygen, temperature, light, or seasonal cues allow growth to begin. New life can be folded into something so small it looks like a speck of dust. Plants also defend themselves. A peaceful-looking leaf may contain tannins, alkaloids, terpenes, phenolics, glucosinolates, waxes, hairs, fibers, or toxins. Some plants call in indirect help by releasing volatile organic compounds that attract predators of the insects eating them. Others become traps. Pitcher plants drown insects. Sundews glue them. Bladderworts suck in tiny prey. Venus flytraps close around them. Parasitic plants such as dodder and rafflesia take resources from hosts through haustoria. Rooted life is not always gentle. Sometimes it is patient and predatory. At the largest scale, plants shape forests, climates, food systems, medicine, and civilization. Forests store carbon in wood, roots, dead matter, and soil. Leaves move water into the air through transpiration. Crops such as rice, wheat, maize, and potatoes feed billions. Plant chemicals have given humans flavors, poisons, medicines, fibers, perfumes, and warnings. Modern plant science now studies genes, conservation, satellites, seed banks, crop resilience, and climate stress, because the future of human life is still tied to the green systems that support it. Plants are stranger than they seem because they show that life does not have to resemble animal life to be active, sensitive, and complex. A houseplant turning toward a window is adjusting to light. Grass recovering after rain is rebuilding itself from water and stored resources. A tree sealing a wound is protecting its living tissues. A seed waiting in the soil is not empty. It is possibility held in silence. The green world is not background scenery. It is one of the great active systems of Earth, quietly building, sensing, resisting, feeding, storing, cooling, signalling, and beginning again. The hidden life of plants is the living activity beneath stillness. It is growth, sensing, signalling, defense, reproduction, cooperation, and the quiet transformation of the world around them. Plant may seem motionless, but its cells are dividing, its roots are exploring, its leaves are exchanging gases, its tissues are carrying water and sugar, and its chemistry is constantly adjusting to light, darkness, dryness, injury, infection, and time. That hidden life began long before forests and flowers. Ancient photosynthetic organisms changed the atmosphere. Chloroplasts emerged through deep cellular partnership. Green algae gave rise to land plants, and those early forms slowly solved the problems of drying out, standing upright, transporting water, and reproducing away from open water. From there came vascular tissues, seeds, pollen, flowers, fruit, and the enormous variety of plant life that now covers so much of Earth. Inside the plant body, every structure has a role. Roots grip soil, absorb water, take in minerals, and meet fungi and microbes in the dark. Stems hold leaves toward the light and connect the underground world to the air above. Xylem carries water upward. Phloem moves sugars through living tissues. Meristems keep producing new growth, allowing plants to rebuild themselves throughout life. Leaves catch sunlight, open and close stomata, manage water loss, and turn air and light into living matter through photosynthesis. That process remains one of the great foundations of life. Plants, algae, and some bacteria use sunlight to build sugars from carbon dioxide and water, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This does not make plants magical, but it does make them astonishing. Much of the food on Earth, much of the oxygen in the air, and much of the energy moving through ecosystems begins with photosynthetic life quietly doing its work. Plants are also far more responsive than they appear. They bend toward light, send roots toward water, fold leaves after touch, open flowers with daily rhythms, and time their growth with seasons. Auxin, gibberellins, cytokinins, abscisic acid, ethylene, jasminates, and salicylic acid help coordinate development, stress, ripening, defense, and disease resistance. Circadian rhythms help plants anticipate dawn. Photoperiodism helps them measure day length and night length. Seeds wait for the right conditions, sometimes holding future life in apparent silence. The green world is not gentle in every detail. Plants defend themselves with thorns, bark, wax, tough leaves, toxins, bitter compounds, and chemical signals. Some release volatile organic compounds that attract the enemies of their attackers. Some become traps like pitcher plants, sundews, bladderworts, and Venus flytraps. Others become parasites, drawing resources from host plants through haustoria. Stillness does not mean passivity. Forests show plant life at its largest scale. They store carbon, shape soils, cool local climates, cycle water, provide habitat, and build layered communities of trees, shrubs, herbs, fungi, animals, microbes, dead wood, and roots. Crops have shaped human civilization. Plant chemistry has given people food, fiber, medicines, flavors, poisons, building materials, and fuel. Modern plant science now studies genes, climate stress, conservation, seed banks, crop resilience, and the future of ecosystems under pressure. Plants do not need human-like thoughts to be complex. There is no need to imagine them as conscious in order to appreciate them truthfully. Their wonder is different: rootedness, patience, modular growth, environmental sensitivity, and the ability to turn sunlight into living structure. The next time a leaf rests in a window, or a tree stands quietly in the dark, it may look still. But beneath that stillness, water is moving, chemistry is changing, cells are working, and life is continuing in silence.